this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Hi, it's Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And today I'm talking with my dear friend, Krista Williams.
It can change you in the best way possible. Dance with the change, dance with the breakdowns.
The embodiment of Pisces intuition with Capricorn power moves.
So I'm like delusionally proud of my chart.
Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, The Case of Lucy Letby, we unpack the story of an unimaginable tragedy that gripped the UK in 2023. But what if we didn't get the whole story?
Evidence has been made to fit.
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
What if the truth was disguised by a story we chose to believe?
Oh my God, I think she might be innocent.
Listen to Doubt, The Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
In 2018, the FBI took down a ring of spies working for China's Ministry of State Security, one of the most mysterious intelligence agencies in the world.
The Sixth Bureau podcast is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the Sixth Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd. In 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
But here's the thing. Bachelor fans hated him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
That's when his life took a disturbing turn. A one-night stand would end in a courtroom.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everybody, Robert Evans here, and I wanted to let you know this is a compilation episode. So every episode of the week that just happened is here in one convenient and with somewhat less ads package for you to listen to in a long stretch if you want. If you've been listening to the episodes every day this week, there's going to be nothing new here for you, but you can make your own decisions.
Welcome to It Could Happen Here, a podcast that for the first time ever is being recorded on an Earth that I no longer have to share with that fascist rat bastard Shinzo Abe. And with me to celebrate this occasion is Garrison Davis.
Oh, hi.
I said hello. And James, have we like introduced you yet?
I don't think so. No, I just pop up talking about 3D printed guns and people who hate butterflies.
Yeah. This is truly a dark day for democracy. I'm saddened by the horrible loss of a great leader, a hero to feminism and women, and I guess a hero to those who defend war crimes.
So I guess before
hurting.
Before we get into one of the funniest things that has happened in maybe 20 years, James, do you want to like talk about who you are, because you are now one of us, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I'm now a podcaster. So who I am? I'm a journalist, I guess, and a historian. I wrote a book about the first week of the Spanish Civil War. And my PhD is in the history of international anti-fascism, building international anti-fascist alliances through physical culture, which is very nerdy. But yeah, I love that stuff. What else? I'm British, if that had not been made abundantly clear by my accent. And I live in Southern California.
Which means this is this episode is a majority Commonwealth episode.
Yeah. That's right.
Which is really exciting.
Oh, no.
We made it. Yeah, we'll be doing the national anthem in a minute here, and we'll all just stand up.
So, ex-prime minister, kind of, he's not around anymore, is he?
No, he is dead as fuck. So, all right, I guess we should explain who Shinzo Abe is.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want a really, really long account of what the Japanese Liberal Democratic Party is, because they are some of the worst people who've ever existed. Go
but
listen to
they're
my
liberal
Bastards
and
episode on
democratic.
Kishi.
How can this be?
So the very short version of this is that the Liberal Democratic Party is a party that was founded by Nobusuke Kishi, who is one of history's worst war criminals, personally responsible for enslaving hundreds of thousands of people in China. He's the guy who basically he's the guy who was in charge of the economy of the fascist war machine. In Japan during World War II, he was the guy who ran like the sort of fascist puppet state called Manchukuo that was run by Japan after they conquered it. Real war criminal, also just like personally raped a like extremely large number of people. A thing that like was almost never discussed when people talk about him.
Yeah,
so, real
like
piece of shit.
Almost like a shockingly high number. Of sex crimes. It's wild.
Yeah, and he's also, I mean, he's involved with the Japanese military sex slave program, which you will hear referred to as comfort women, and I fucking refuse to call them comfort women because that is a fucking horrifying euphemism for, again, a program of military sex slavery. He also was one of the people who signed off on Unit 731, which was Japan's chemical weapons testing unit, where they fucking, like, purposely infected and tested chemical weapons on prisoners. Yeah, he's one of the worst people ever, and then he got a bunch of CIA backing and some backing from the Yakuza because the CIA is working with the Yakuza in early 1950s Japan, and he's able basically to force all of the other conservative like people to join his party, and the sort of the merger of the Liberal Party and the Democratic Party is now the Liberal Democratic Party. This is Kishi's party. He founded it. He drags everyone else into it. He does an immense amount of corruption. He tries to bring fascism back. He narrowly fails. Shinzo Abe is his grandson. The LDP, Liberal Democratic Party, it sucks. It's like
love it when they're families.
The way that I've been thinking about, like, how do you explain this to people who don't have like a background in like Japanese like war crime stuff is like, imagine if like one of Hitler's generals had like survived World War II, and then the CIA made him the fucking prime minister of Germany, and then.
And also, he got more fascist because people were saying mean things about his grandpa. He's like, "Oh, I don't like that they're calling him bad names. I'm gonna get more fascist now."
So, like, Abe himself, he's been carrying out a lot of the same things that Kishi was trying to do. Kishi was trying to sort of restore the sort of full fascist power of the police. Abe has been doing a whole bunch of shit of centralizing power in the executive and expanding the police's power to just arrest whoever the fuck they want. So one of the other things about Japan is that, like, legally in their constitution, they can't go to war. And, like, both Kishi and Abe, like, this is, like, their big fucking thing is that they want to fully rearm Japan. They want Japan to be able to go to war because they want to do the fucking empire again. And... you know, so this has led, Abe's been doing that. He also, the thing he's probably most famous for in terms of, like, the reasons people think he's bad, because he's, like, just actually a monster, is he's just, like, a like, unfathomable degree of war crimes denial. Like, he pulled, Japan in the 90s had admitted that they fucking kidnapped and enslaved like an enormous number of people from people from Korea, people from China. I think they also did in the Philippines and Indonesia too, although there's less sort of coverage of that, and like turned them into military sex slaves, did things to them that are like fucking unspeakable. And so the Japanese government in the 90s had admitted that they did this and apologized for it, and Abe was like, no, fuck that. That's wrong. He's also a part of this group called Nippon Kagai, which is like a fascist group. And okay, so this is according to a U.S. congressional report, what they believe, quote, Japan should be applauded for liberating much of East Asia from Western colonial powers, that the 1946-1948 Tokyo War Crimes Tribunals were illegitimate, and that the killings by Japanese troops through the 1937 Nanjing Massacre were exaggerated or fabricated.
Oh boy.
They also openly, They also, so they're Nanjing denialists. They're sex slave denialists. They openly call for the restoration of the monarchy and the institution of Shinto as a state religion. Abe has continually said that the sex slaves were there voluntarily. There's another thing
that but Hillary Clinton just tweeted that Prime Minister Abe was a champion of democracy and a firm believer that no economy, society, or country can achieve its full potential if you leave women behind.
She tweeted
that.
To be fair, both Abe and Nobusuke Kishi did in fact believe in using women to fuel the economy, just not in that way.
Yeah.
He also there's another thing that probably the most famous, most controversial thing was, so there's this shrine called the Yasukuni Shrine, which is it's the shrine that's dedicated to soldiers who died serving the Japanese emperor. And in this, so there's this thing called the Book of Souls that has lists of names, right, of just the people who died, and 1,068 of the people who were of the people in that book are people who were convicted of war crimes. And there are also 14 Class A war criminals who either died or were executed who are considered martyrs there. And Abe fucking visited there and prayed and shit. And this pissed off everyone. And this is there are lots of people who have gotten mad at me already for celebrating Abe's death. And my official line on this is, if Abe didn't want me to celebrate his fucking death, maybe he shouldn't have celebrated the lives of the people who killed my fucking family. So fuck them. Yeah.
So he's not a great dude.
He's real bad.
Yeah.
And
problematic dude.
So the other thing we should mention too, before we go into sort of the details of the shooting, is that there is an election. Actually, by the time this episode drops, I think the election will have happened, where there is a real chance that the Liberal Democratic Party is going to sort of just fucking sweep it, because the Liberal Democratic Party immediately starts blaming the left for this. There's a whole bunch of, just absolutely horrifying stuff where they're blaming Korean people who live in Japan, which, if you know anything about Japanese history, when that stuff starts happening, in 1923, after the Kanto earthquake, a bunch of people just started blaming Koreans for the whole thing, and they fucking literally exterminated almost the entire Korean population in several major Japanese cities. And so this stuff is very scary. It's possible that this is going to set off an incredible right-wing lurch in Japanese politics, and there's a chance that this could be the actual thing that full-on triggers Japan rearming and going back into sort of just being a pure fascist empire. So this is not that part is really bad.
The motivation for the assassination is still, at least at time of recording, still slightly unclear.
Very unclear.
according to some politicians and news media, we do know the suspect is Hideo Kojima, so you can infer a little bit based on. So yeah, there's French politicians and a Greek news channel who are using pictures of video game developer Hideo Kojima and passing them off as the shooting suspect.
Yeah,
which is really funny.
It is extremely funny.
Pictures of Kojima inside a Russian communist hat fucking thing. Pictures of him wearing a Joker shirt and standing in front of a Che Guevara picture.
It's very funny.
And they're using this as proof that it's by a left-wing terrorist, and it's actually video game developer Hideo Kojima.
So in terms of
I
guess what we know about the actual shooter, we don't know that much. Is a 42-year-old guy who was a former veteran of the Japanese Self-Defense Force. He was a Navy guy, which I guess partially explains why he can shoot a gun. But yeah, the details are really murky. What we've got at time of recording is the Japanese police saying that it wasn't because of a political thing, and that it was because of a group that Abe was a member of. Who the fuck knows what that means? That can mean any number of things. I'm not going to speculate live on here because I don't know. But also it was extremely funny.
And we should talk about the weapon that was used.
This is why this is one of the reasons why it's extremely funny.
And we should I'm probably gonna hand this over to James, because James is a bit more of an expert in this type of DIY weaponry. So what the fuck is going on with this homemade gun?
This shit is fucking. This is crazy.
So funny.
Yeah, it's extremely funny. It's extremely funny that all these people with 50,000 followers on Twitter who quote unquote do OSINT, like immediately label this a 3D printed gun, which it's not.
It does not look 3D printed.
No. This gun is being held together with duct tape. Like that is the kind of weapon that we are dealing with here. This is a homemade gun, like held together with fucking duct tape. It is extremely. It is like he got blown up by an electric blunderbuss. It is.
Yeah, it's like there could very well be 3D printed parts in like around it, but it is. But it's not. It's not looking. It's not like an FGC9 or anything.
No,
it's a weird like electronic pipe duct taped together shotgun.
Yeah, I think perhaps if people don't understand, we should like break down how firearms work broadly and then how this one works specifically.
Sure.
Right? So like, there's no reason why you should be familiar with this, but like you need something to explode, something to make it explode, and something to go out the end, and a way to make sure it only goes in one direction, right? So what this character has done is seemingly, it's like a blunderbuss or a musket in that it seems to be like muzzle loaded from the front. I'm looking at it now, and it really is just covered in duct tape. I tweeted a picture of it. This shit is very old fashioned. He seems to have made his own powder too. Like it was very, very smoky, which you can do. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but it's a thing that is possible. And so, essentially, from what I'm seeing here, it looks like it's like a piezoelectric ignition, which then ignites this homemade powder that he had, and then he's put something in. A shotgun means it doesn't have rifling, right? So it doesn't impart spin on the projectile. So he's basically got two pipes, a piezoelectric igniter, some homemade powder, and then he could have put nails in there. He could have put a cast lead ball, anything, bolts.
And this wasn't the only homemade weapon he had. When police raided his house, he had a whole bunch of stuff it looks like it's out of like Fallout or something. It is like there was one like blunderbuss that had 9 different barrels all duct taped together. It's with like exposed wiring, exposed circuit boards. Like it's extremely janky.
Yeah, it's like I'm not entirely sure that the 9-barrel one, the central barrel, isn't touched by the structural duct tape, and I'm not sure that it wouldn't have moved in one direction or the other when he fired it.
It's really incredible.
Yeah, I think there's like a yoga. I can't see what, but he's put something on he's made a buttstock with that one, so like he can shoulder it, I guess. And I don't know if that's like a piece of tire or what, but this is not a precision weapon.
Wooden boards. There's like some type of like it looks almost like a smartphone's attached to some of the wiring, or like there's
I wonder if that's what it is.
There's some like reflective screen that looks like it's like an electronic control box, which could just be like an old smartphone or something.
Yeah, I wondered if because that's what you use for an improvised explosive device, right? It's a cell phone to actuate it. So it could be that maybe he had a plan to just put it near where Abe was going to be and then call it. And then have it go off.
God, that would be well. I mean,
no. This is a much better. This is a much better assassination.
It has the stock, so I'm guessing he would be planning to hold it because otherwise there's no reason to put the butt stock there.
True.
But who knows? Like
this guy's operating on a different level.
We have no way to know what he was thinking. At least not at the moment.
What he was thinking was, I want to kill Shinzo Abe with my pipes and planks.
And he did it. He successfully. Whatever you think of him, this man did successfully kill Shinzo Abe with a gun held together by duct tape. It was pretty impressive. Like I think the other thing about this is kind of impressive. There were 2 barrels on it that each fired, and he managed to hit him from like a pretty good distance away. Like we don't have there's no video that directly, well, at least not that's out yet, that like directly shows the shooter. But we have a lot of video because Abe is giving a speech, right? And so we have a bunch of video of like filming Abe, and because of where it is coming from off screen, like that was a pretty good distance. And as best I can tell, he only hit Abe. I haven't seen any reports of anyone else getting hit. So remarkably impressive.
That is actually kind of slightly surprising.
Yeah.
There was no one else hit. It's like he just got the guy he was wanting
it's like
to.
That is genuinely pretty rare in assassinations.
For like basically a homemade blunderbuss cannon is like surprisingly controlled and accurate.
Yeah,
it's
I've just found a picture of it with the Cyberpunk 2077 logo underneath it, which is pretty great.
Oh, that rules.
Yeah, this does rule. He did manage to cause. He could have just put like a large, massive lead ball in it, I guess. Whatever. Because he didn't even shoot him.
I don't think it was one thing. So the one thing I could say about that we know about the ammo is that like there were like a bunch of like a bunch of the reports about the injuries that he suffered were talking about like he got hit in the back, but there were also holes in his neck. So my guess is that there was a lot of
blood from a lot of different places.
Yeah, my guess is it wasn't one thing then, but I don't know. The other thing that's kind of interesting about this is like the extent to which so like he was like Abe was like very clearly dead. Like people had like reported him at the scene as having no vitals, and they were like, yeah, his heart stopped, and
they helicoptered him to like what, Tokyo?
Yeah, they helicoptered him to Tokyo, but the Japanese government did a very good job of making sure the press had like no information, and so there was just like many hours where they were like pretending that he wasn't dead and like wouldn't confirm that he was dead, and he's like, this man is clearly dead as shit. Like he has gotten blown up by a blunderbuss, like in the back. His neck's gone. His neck's not gone, but like his neck's been shot. His heart is stopped, and they just sort of like keep it there for a pretty impressively long amount of time. And that's the other thing. Yeah, we know very little about what happened and why. The press has been keeping the government's been keeping a very tight lid on information about the shooting so far. Yeah, I guess we want to pivot into the gun control side of this.
Sure.
I guess. Sure, yeah, okay, so
I mean, there was a mayor shot a few years ago.
Yeah,
in
2007.
Japan, right?
A Yakuza guy shot the mayor of Nagasaki. So like, there's been a lot of people, like journalists, people who are like supposedly Japan experts, who are like, oh, this is really rare in Japanese culture. It's like, no, it's not. People get assassinated like Japan has a very low rate of gun violence, but of that gun violence, the number of politicians that get assassinated is like unbelievably high. And I mean, like there've been a lot of. I mean, like Abe's like grandfather Nobusuke Kishi like got stabbed right after he left office, like, and he only didn't die because the guy who stabbed him claimed that he wasn't trying to kill him, he was just stabbing him, which is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. Which I don't know. I suspect some Yakuza bullshit was going on there, but yeah, like Japan has assassinations. There's this weird thing where people think Japan is this place that's like no violence happens, like it's a completely orderly society. It's like all this like weird stuff made up about Asians.
Famously pacifist Japan.
Yeah, it's like this is a country like this is a country where people like even in like the 70s and like even through the 80s, people would charge like army convoys with sticks and like fight them. Like this is a country that like people they have a sort of apeshit switch that just like.
Yeah, they have their fair share of like cults that do acts of violence like this. They have their fair share of political extremists that do acts of violence like this. And like everywhere else in everywhere else in the world, stuff just happens sometimes.
Yeah. I think it is interesting that like Japan has extremely strict gun control, right? Like licenses, tests, background checks, prohibitions on most people owning and carrying. But like, it's kind of interesting that this is more of a like a First Amendment question, I guess, in American terms, right? Like, if you're on the internet enough, I'm sure it looks like this person has just Googled how to make gun, and like this is what came up. And so I think it's kind of fascinating that this person has been like, aside from their possible connections to any criminal networks, but like. I know the Yakuza were selling guns to people in Myanmar pretty recently, so they have access to this person.
Yeah, and like, and the mayor who got whacked by a Yakuza guy, like, if the Yakuza is gonna do, like, I don't know. If Yakuza is gonna do a killing, like they have access to weapons.
They would use a real gun. They would
use
duct taped together.
You know, okay, so like probably, but also like I wouldn't completely rule it out, because I wouldn't rule out them just finding some guy and doing this thing the FBI does, and it's like, hey, you're gonna go do an attack now. Like it wouldn't surprise me if they did that as like a plausible deniability thing, but like we don't know.
I still don't think we can rule out that Hideo Kojima is the mastermind behind this. And it's all.
I mean, it's convoluted enough to be a Kojima plot.
I know, right? It is. It's just a ploy to plug his next game. Just have to add a few like nonsense names to all the people involved, like Blunderbustman, and then it's just it's easy.
But yeah, it's fascinating that this person was seemingly like maybe had other plans or had tried several other like craft firearms and settled on this one. But yeah, they had access to a lot of pipes, that's for sure. Did you guys see the Yakuza guy who was arms dealing to Myanmar?
No.
Oh, fucking wild. So he was like extensively stung by the feds. So this guy, he was Yakuza. He was part of a ongoing sting operation for like several years, where he was selling, like basically like trading guns for drugs, or trading guns to buy drugs. So he was selling to a couple of groups in Myanmar. He was to groups in like the Tamil region, and a couple of other people. And he was. At least one of the people he thought was a buyer was actually a Fed, and they've captured all of these amazing conversations where they call the guns like cake and ice cream. And like one of the things in the criminal complaint is a picture of him just with like a law, like an anti-tank weapon, and he's just like giving it like the V sign, and he's wearing these like yellow aviators and a leather jacket. And like the way they arrested him was at a steakhouse, I think either in New York or New Jersey. But like they lured him into a steakhouse meeting, and then he got busted by the feds. But yeah, these guys were trafficking like serious stuff, like surface-to-air missiles and things. So they have access to some pretty heavy equipment.
Yeah, that's a pretty old, like the Yakuza has been sort of like, I don't know how you describe it, like a kind of like para arm of the Japanese state in a lot of ways for a very, very long time. Like there have been like Yakuza people with basically special forces training. They at one point like kidnapped and killed the Empress of Korea as part of like a thing to like justify starting a war. So they're very well hooked up. I don't know. It's still unclear to me, because like that's the other thing again. Like the LDP has a lot of Yakuza connections, because partially kind of everything is Yakuza connections, but partially also because the Yakuza were like a sort of founding like political bloc of the LDP in the first place. So who knows, like LDP people have gotten like attacked by Yakuza people before. It could be that, it could be something else. We sort of just don't know yet.
Yeah. There's nothing identifying this guy. Like I'm just looking at a picture of him, and there's nothing particularly sort of identifying his clothing or anything like that.
Yeah, I guess that's the death of Shinzo Abe.
Yeah.
Extremely funny. Rest in piss.
Critical support to Hideo Kojima and all of the other freedom fighters.
I guess we could talk a little bit about the international response to this.
Yeah, because people have no idea what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, like, all the Americans are sort of like all American liberals are sort of doing the like, oh my god, he was a good guy. And it's like, no, he wasn't. This guy was a monster. Okay, I will say this: both the Chinese and the Korean embassies are being surprisingly diplomatic about it. No one has actively insulted him yet. Social media wise,
politically, that's a good move for like inter-country relations.
Yeah, but Japanese relationships with South Korea and North Korea are really bad, and a lot of the reason why they're really bad is specifically because of Shinzo Abe and because of all of his bullshit. with
so
the
they're
war
obviously
crimes
happy,
denial.
but they're not going to like rub it in.
Well, I mean, it's not clear to me that they wouldn't have done this if this had happened in like the 2010s. Like, it's
interesting.
These guys really hate each other. There's been some sort of like people. I don't know. People are trying to do a Taiwan angle on this because Abe is like a Taiwan supporter, but I don't. I don't think there's actually that much. People want this to have much more geopolitical like significance than it probably actually will. Yeah.
Well,
But
it's
in the meantime, fascist is dead. That's always funny.
It happened. It did in fact happen here. Well, it happened over there, but you know what I mean.
It could happen here.
Statistically, we are about to do based on
to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't need to
Honestly,
resort to the duct tape model in America.
No, with the amount of firearms here, it is sometimes a little surprising how little stuff like this actually happens. There's obviously a lot of work that goes into like preventing it, but still, sometimes it's kind of shocking.
I think if you look at the last 20 years, I think more Japanese politicians have been assassinated than American politicians. Like I'm trying to think of an American politician because
it's weird because there's a lot more American politicians and a lot more guns.
They killed when they went after Gabby Giffords, they killed someone, I think, but I'm trying to think of anyone else other than that.
Not in recent memory. The guy who shot Reagan is now touring.
But he didn't even kill him. That's not even an assassination. That's just an assassination attempt. Like,
a very botched one.
Yeah.
Crossover between John Hinckley and Hideo Kojima.
It's possible.
That will be the game.
I'm just gonna keep referring to the suspect as Hideo Kojima.
It's worth noting that he did have armed guards. There were armed guards present. Like you can see their guns in their holsters as they take down the person who shot him. But they were not on their A game that day.
Yeah, that you can see in the video. There's like one of the guys is I think trying to like get a bulletproof briefcase in between Abe and the guy, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't. It just fails completely.
They had one job. They didn't.
Operation Meat Shield.
They weren't just not on their A game. They completely failed at their only job.
Yeah. It's not like the guy even tried to run away. He just like stood there and got arrested.
He did not really put up much of a fight.
Yeah.
He didn't. I think. Yeah, he went down pretty fast. I guess he went with like this smaller gun maybe to conceal it because it looks like he was pretty close.
Yeah, that is very likely. Well, a very dark day for democracy. Dark day for feminism, as Hillary Clinton said. Anyway.
Yeah, luckily they have Rahm Emanuel as ambassador to Japan to comfort them in this difficult time.
The LDP are the only people on Earth who actually deserve Rahm Emanuel. So, look, if you didn't want to have to deal with Rahm Emanuel, you shouldn't have taken all that CIA money. This is now their curse.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk more about these types of homemade weapons and all that kind of stuff in the future because it is interesting, and places where like actual firearms are harder to get. We're seeing more and more shit like this popping up.
And
that will definitely be worth getting into along with 3D printed weapons. All right. Anything else to add? Does that do it?
Yeah, I think that's a wrap.
All right. Well. Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at HappenHerePod and Cool Zone Media. See you next time, and critical support to Hideo Kojima.
Hi, this is Jo Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveller said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom loving and different perspectives. And I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
In 2023, a story gripped the UK, evoking horror and disbelief.
The nurse who should have been in charge of caring for tiny babies is now the most prolific child killer in modern British history.
Everyone thought they knew how it ended. A verdict, a villain, a nurse named Lucy Letby.
Lucy Letby has been found guilty.
But what if we didn't get the whole story?
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we follow the evidence and hear from the people that lived it to ask what really happened when the world decided who Lucy Letby was.
No voicing of any skepticism or doubt.
It'll cause so much harm at every single level of the British establishment of this is wrong.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
China's Ministry of State Security is one of the most mysterious and powerful spy agencies in the world. But in 2017, the FBI got inside.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
This MSS officer has no idea the U.S. government is onto him. But the FBI has his chats, texts, emails, even his personal diary. Hear how they got it on the 6th Bureau podcast.
I now have several terabytes of an MSS officer, no doubt, no question, of his life. And that's a unicorn.
No one had ever seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
This is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the 6th Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Please search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to It Could Happen Here, the podcast that just happened here. All right, that's my part done. Chris, what are we talking about today?
I have brought you all here today to discuss one of the most sacred and venerable of our political institutions, an institution whose words echo through history and carve the political, legal, and economic framework of our world. I am referring, of course, to the bread riot.
Hey, there we go. I love a good bread riot.
I do too. This is a non-zero part of why I wrote this episode.
How is this relatable? The grain supply seems really stable right now.
It's always
what everyone says
stable.
about the grain supply.
No one has thrown a Molotov through a bank window in 200 years. I was reliably informed by several Marxist historians that bread riots were over.
I'm gonna Google Ukrainian wheat harvest, as I do every exactly 5 years. The moment just now came up where I check it every 5 years. So let me just.
Is that a good idea?
Oh dear.
No. Is there a problem? Well, let me go eat my 5th Wonder Bread slice of the day and not think about it.
Good stuff. All right, so yeah, let's talk bread riots.
Yeah, we're talking bread riots. So bread riots are an ancient institution. You can find them like very easily as far back as the Roman Republic.
Yeah, it is 80% of Roman Republican politics.
Yeah,
is people rioting over bread.
Like, okay, if you wanted to like go further back than that, I have no doubt you could like spend probably 10 minutes and find bread rioting in like Sumeria or something. I didn't do this, and the reason I didn't do this, even though I'm talking about the history of the bread riot, is that the structure of the bread riot is shaped inexorably by the sort of political and economic conditions around it. And the political and economic conditions of ancient Rome are somewhat similar to us, but not really. So instead of doing that, we're starting in the late 1700s, where there are a lot of bread riots. But particularly, there's a lot of very well-documented bread riots in the UK and France. And I guess before we actually like talk about the specific riots, we should talk about what a bread riot actually is. Because, okay, so I mean, on a very superficial level, a bread riot is when people don't have bread and they riot. But the actual response to that and what the riots look like are interesting and sort of complicated. I'm going to quote now from the book Free Markets and Food Riots. This is talking about specifically the 1700s riots, but yeah, food riots took several forms. A, the blockade or entrave that prevented the export of grain from an area in which shortages existed. B, the price riot or taxation populare, in which food was seized by protesters, a just price set, and the lot sold. C, agrarian demonstrations in which farmers destroyed their own produce as a dramatic protest. And D, the market riot, in which the crowd took retributive action against commercial agents, bakers, millers, or local magistrates in the form of looting or tumultuous assembly to force dealers or local authorities to reduce prices. So, okay, there's a lot of different things going on here. We're going to get back to the farmers' protest stuff like a lot later because the specific kind of like rural like versions of this kind of fade into the background for a couple of centuries. What's happening in the urban centers, though, is really interesting in a lot of ways. And it gets at the core of what's going on in these sort of like late 1700s riots. Notably, the crowds who are doing the rioting aren't just like, they're not just like seizing the bread and eating it, which is a thing that like you would assume they would be doing if they were, you know, it's a bunch of people who are starving and there's bread and they take it, right? But that's actually not what they're doing. What they're doing is essentially negotiating over price. You see this in the sort of price riot thing, right? You know, the thing that they actually do is they seize a bunch of grain and then they sell it off at what they sort of like, at what they deem a fair price is. And, you know, what this is attempting to do basically is it's a very, very direct way of trying to get bakers to lower their prices. And the other thing that's about these riots is that they're very politically sophisticated and they're very targeted. There's a thing you hear a lot, and if you've ever read anything about any modern riot, you will hear just people ranting about how people are blindly destroying their own neighborhoods, and it's just like not true. Riots tend to have a sort of specific political focus on attacking specific targets, which is why, like, you know, the first things that go up in a riot are pawn shops, liquor stores, police stations, and now stores that treat their employees badly.
They literally have specific targets.
Yeah. Like it's you know, it's very like all of the stuff that's happening is stuff that has like it's the result of political grievances that people have sort of been accumulating for a long time. And this is also true of these early bread riots too. Going back to the book Free Markets and Food Riots. Protesters did not rampage indiscriminately, but focused their wrath on particular individuals and institutions whom the crowd held responsible for unjust practices. Typically, it was not the producers or retailers of food, but the middlemen who were seen as responsible for shortages and price raises, the grain dealers, wholesalers, speculators, and mills. Grain shipments by wagon, ship, and canal barge were seized and distributed among participants or sold at a just price. Warehouses were raided with similar results. Textile workers in 1770 Reims, quote, seized the town's markets, proceeded to sell all the grain in the market at 3/4 of the current price. They then turned their attention to the warehouse and to the granaries of numerous religious houses, which they treated in a similar fashion. Yeah, and so like this is a pretty remarkable degree of political sophistication, right? They're not targeting sort of farmers or bakers, and especially not targeting people who are like well known and liked in the community. They're targeting people who they can directly tie to grain price speculation. And this is in some sense like this is a demonstration of the kind of like basic contradiction of the market, right? On the one hand, you have bread as this like physical thing that you need to survive, and on the other hand, you have bread as this market commodity, and as a market commodity, it's a sort of speculative asset, which people are like buying and selling and hoarding like stocks not because they actually need to eat it, but because they're interested in its sort of market value. And the Marxists will call this the difference between use value, or like the value you get from eating a piece of bread, and the exchange value, which is like the bread as a commodity that can be traded for other commodities. And and like this is in some sense like this is behind a lot of like the housing crisis right now. You have a bunch of people who buy houses and apartment buildings that not because they need to live in them, but as an asset that will appreciate over time, like appreciate in value over time, like stocks do. But this means that people who like need houses to like live in them, like don't get a house because they're being held by people who are trying to get their value to appreciate. And the goal of these riots is basically to prevent bread from becoming an exchange value. That is to sort of like market commodity used for speculation and turn them back into use values. But even again here, this is interesting, right? Because it's not like these people are like anti-market, anti-capitalist, right? They tend not to sort of just seize the bread outright. What they're doing is they're insisting on buying it at a specific quote unquote just price. And this sort of gets into the question of like, why are these riots happening in the first place? The obvious explanation, like, okay, the people are rioting because the price of bread is increasing, but that's not actually like an explanation, right? It's a precondition. But like, there's a lot of places where bread prices rise and you never get a riot. So a lot of people have studied this and tried to figure out what is happening. The second explanation that historians come up with is something called the moral economy. And in this model, people aren't just reacting to like a price increase. What they're actually reacting to is what becomes known as the entitlement gap, which is this gap between what people think they're entitled to based on like their morality and how hard they work, et cetera, and like what they actually get. And so, in less academic language, it's people going like, I'm getting price gouged. This is bullshit. Bring the prices down than what they're supposed to be. And, that's part of it. There's another theory that argues that food riots are driven by these like really complicated sort of like webs of horizontal social relations and like things like networks of wives and like political organizations and sort of like alliances that happen inside of villages, stuff like that. And that, these groups sort of like react to price increases by banding together and forcing people to lower prices. Now, notably, one of the things I listed in those that like web of things, right, is wives networks as the sort of like first community web that leads to food riots. And this is turns out to be important. Women are often like the leaders and initiator of bread riots, and the sort of theory behind it is that they're actually the ones like buying the bread, and so they're more in tune with disturbances of food prices, et cetera, et cetera. And the food price increases are a threat to what academics call social reproduction, or in essence, like taking care of yourself, your family, and your household, and like making sure you can sort of support and raise your children. So the good version of it is you're taking care of the people around you. The cynical version of it is it's social reproduction because you're creating another generation of workers for capital. But because women end up doing like an enormously disproportionate amount of that work, they wind up in the streets first because they're the people who are most acutely sort of like sensitive to this stuff happening. Yeah, what's the other thing that's sort of worth noting here is that riots are these kind of bread riots are usually urban affairs, and they're the product of people who live in cities, right? It's your sort of artisans, your industrial workers. There's this like fighting core of teenagers who seem to show up in all of these bread riots, and thankfully that never happens today. We do not have a bunch of teenagers who show up every time to fight the cops when something bad happens. No experience with this.
Yeah, I've certainly never seen anything like that happen. Do these other countries have the feds put piles of bricks out on the street?
Well, this is we haven't they haven't gotten to that level of entrapment yet. They're not powerful enough. This is before the development of the police state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they didn't have an FBI to burn down the 3rd precinct.
Yeah, they haven't invented the agent provocateur yet.
Yeah, a cunning false flag.
So what's interesting about the 18th century riots, though, is I've been talking a lot about how these are led by women, and that's true. But specifically, the 1700s ones tend to be more gender balanced than later riots. And I'm going to read this from the historian Lynn Taylor because it's one of the funniest things I've ever read in my life, and I love it. Cynthia Bolton's study of the French Flower War of 1775 makes clear the mixed nature of traditional food riots. Indeed, the number of men involved had increased significantly in the Flower Wars due to the changing male economic, social, including familial, and political status during the Ancien Regime. Theirs was a life of precarious and declining social economic position, disequilibrium in the family structure, political alienation, one that left them in positions similar to those of mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters. The men who rioted had, in crucial ways, been feminized.
Oh boy.
They are rioting because they've been forced femmed.
This is a thing that literally happened in Myanmar during the uprising. There are kind of local cultural sort of attitudes there that have made it for a long time essentially considered shameful to touch women's clothing or particular there's certain things that you don't wear and that you're not supposed to look at if you see someone dressed that way that are traditional women's clothing, and so a bunch of male protesters would dress that way and form up in ranks at the protests because it made the police uncomfortable and sometimes back off.
That's extremely cool.
Yeah, there's some literal examples of that in very recent riots.
Yeah, and I think that gets at one of the things that's sort of happening. It's happening in this period too, which is that one of the kinds of things that generates these bread riots is this kind of is this instability in gender roles, and is this sort of instability in what the role of a person in society is going to be. And that, I don't know, it has a lot of interesting effects, and when those effects are riots, the stuff that happens is really cool because you get a lot of sort of gender roles getting messed up. You get a lot of social ties being broken. I guess so. The other thing that's going on in this period, that is important because it sort of foreshadows a lot of what the sort of later bread riots are going to be about, is that, and this is the fourth theory of bread riots. If you sort of go through your economic historians of this stuff, they're talking about basically the late 1700s are one of the sort of key moments in the formation of the modern state, and what this means in terms of food is that control of the food supply is moved from this sort of parentalistic feudal state thing where on a local level you have guaranteed prices and access to food, and this is shifted to laissez-faire capitalism, in which there are no price controls. There's no guarantee you can get food, and subsequent to this also at the same time is the centralization of the military bureaucracy. And the centralization of the military bureaucracy means that they're taking more control of the food supply. Here's from Free Markets and Food Riots again. Older parentalistic models operating at the local level and assuring a plentiful supply of necessaries at a low price were undermined by new national policies aimed at greater efficiency and market regulation. Spanning a century and more, the policies included such varied activities as enclosure, land concentration, capital intensification of farming, proletarianization, grain exports, taxes, tariffs, and other government efforts to regulate the food supply. Price riots were simply one expression of popular grievances stemming from this broader change. And this is something that's very common. Bread riots are deeply and intimately linked with the ways that the food production process is changing, and specifically they're linked to the ways the food production process is changing because of the state and markets. But we're sort of leading into the late 1700s, and at this point, something happened that no one expected. A bread riot went completely the other direction and it irrevocably changed the state and the market itself. And I am talking about history's maybe most famous bread riot. That's right, it's the French Revolution, baby. Liberty, égalité, fraternity, han. And this is
you mean to tell me that the French had a revolution?
I mean, it's kind of marginal, admittedly.
That doesn't sound like the French that I know.
That's true. The modern French have replaced revolution with racism, unfortunately. Yeah. But look, we're in the 1700s. Things are different. And so we're in a second we're going to talk about the bread riot that changed the history of bread riots and the course of world history forever. But first, do you know who doesn't love bread riots?
Marie Antoinette?
Yeah.
Yep. Who is the primary sponsor of this show. She realized the whole cake thing didn't work out great, so now she's saying, let them have podcasts. Let them cast pods. We're back, and our primary sponsor has been executed by a mob. So if you are a member of European nobility, maybe you're a Habsburg, hit us up and offer us a sponsorship.
Yeah. We're going to rewind a little bit before they kill Marie Antoinette to get to how that happened. So one of the things, if you read the sort of literature on bread riots, one of the things bread riot people will talk about over and over again is bread riots being apolitical. And they kind of like stretch this to a point. Well, because I mean, okay, so there's a couple levels which doesn't make any sense, right? Like, okay, if you think that bread is being sold at too high a price because people are gouging you, that is political, right? And then you go out and make them not do that.
Yeah,
that's politics.
People love to say things aren't political when they don't align with like a simple political party. Like if it doesn't line up directly with the kind of approved debate topics between the political parties that dominate things, they like to say shit is apolitical. But starving because of tax decisions or whatnot is an inherently political thing.
Yeah, and deciding that you're not going to starve and taking bread from people is an incredibly political thing.
Yeah, that's a politics.
But,
you have done a politics.
Yeah, you've done a lot of politics, and but one of the things that and the other thing this leads to is if a thing that involves bread suddenly like turns into capital P politics, and suddenly you have people doing things that are like well understood as like conventional political gestures, immediately everyone stops calling it a bread riot. And if you look at what's actually happening, it's here's a bunch of people who are mad about the price of bread. They went to change the price of bread. It kind of didn't work, and so instead they overthrew the government. And this is the bread riot that we're getting to now. Up until 1789, like you can argue that like historians will argue that these bread riots are apolitical. That just ends on I think it's October 5th, 1789. But by this point, the French Revolution is like well underway. They've stormed the Bastille. There's a bunch of people in a parliament writing a constitution. But like in October of 1789, it's still unclear like how radical any of this is going to be, right? At this point, it still seems likely that there's going to be a king, and not only is there going to be a king, the king is still going to be pretty strong. And then, on October 5th, 1789, maybe history's most famous bread riot breaks out. So 7,000 women who are like incredibly pissed off at the high price of bread in Paris march on Versailles, which is where the royal family of France had been like governing France for like 100 years. And these women are really, really angry, and they basically force the royal family to come back with them to Paris. And I guess it's important to note here that Paris and Versailles are like 12 miles apart. So this isn't like a multi-day journey. They just like get mad one day and they wake up and they walk to the next city over. And this radically changes the entire direction of the French Revolution, because if the royal family is in Versailles, right, like the Parisian mob doesn't have direct access to them. But once they're in Paris, and once this bread riot like brings the king to Paris, suddenly the entire concentrated political power of the French system is now centered in Paris, and is now in a place where subsequent bread riots can actually do stuff. And this directly leads to the kings being executed. This leads to our sponsors getting guillotined, and it completely cements bread as sort of like the central part of like one of the central aspects of what the French Revolution is about. Like by the end of the revolution, the slogan of the sort of revolutionary French working class is bread in the Constitution of 1793. So you can look at the priorities there and look at like all of this as sort of in a sort of extended rolling bread riot. Unfortunately for us, and spoilers to everyone who has not caught up on the end of the French Revolution, the revolution loses and Napoleon takes power. And this is where we enter the era of what's known as the bourgeois revolution. This is the modern era, and if you've read your Eric Hobsbawm, you're sort of very conventional like Marxist historians, or your conventional sort of liberal historians. They will all tell you that the bread riot sort of dies in the early 1800s, and that's replaced by like strikes and political protests organized by unions and parties, because like the rural class has been like displaced at the center of history by the industrial working class. And that's just like not true. And it's not true in two senses. One, it's in the sense that like we have bread riots now, but it's also not true because there's another wave of bread riots that are very, very conventional and very much sort of in the classic 1700s mode. Here's Lynn Taylor again. It is true that the proactive form of protest became common, even predominant, by the early 20th century. However, scattered through the periodical literature are accounts of 20th century food riots which look surprisingly like those of the 18th and early 19th century, something not expected in modern industrialized nation-states. Food riots occurred in northern France in 1911, in Britain during the winter of 1916-1917, in New York in 1917, in Toronto in both 1924 and 1923, in Barcelona in 1918, in Vichy, France in 1942, and in northern France throughout the German occupation. The form of protest was remarkably consistent in each, and reminiscent of traditional food riots of earlier centuries. And these are very conventional sort of 18th century bread riots. They're led by women. They're led by women who are refusing to pay higher prices for food. And in some sense, they kind of are apolitical in that there are various attempts in like basically all of these protests by like organized political organizations to take them over. And basically every single time the women who are involved are like, no, absolutely not. There's a very funny one where I think this is the British one in 1916, 1917, where like a bunch of men show up and the women are like, no, go home. You can't riot with us. This is our riot. Now, yeah, the British case in particular is also interesting because this is the middle of World War I, and so this is the sort of giant presence looming over these bread riots, and the government sort of like the government in response to this, response to sort of widespread hunger, like decrees these price controls on food, but farmers are just refusing to obey them. And so women in Mayport organized, and the result was, quote, when one farmer said he did not care what the government said about price controls, there was bedlam. The women rushed the farmer's cart, and the street was, quote, filled with hooting, yelling women and young people, while potatoes, cabbages, and turnips were flying through the air. The example of Mayport soon spread to other parts of the country. These riots were led by housewives, who had filled the front lines and did much of the fighting, although the miners of Cumberland were also active in supporting their wives' efforts, both as added bodies strengthening the crowds, but also through the Miners Association and other working class institutions. So I don't know. I had to include this just specifically because the image of a bunch of people throwing cabbages at farmers is extremely funny to me. But the other thing I think is interesting here is you can start to see the shifts from these sort of 18th century like riots to these ones on a social level where, in the 1800s, you're dealing with sort of like town and sort of peasant cultural groupings who are supporting the protest. But by the 1900s, bread riots are being backed by like organized political institutions. There's another one in New York in 1917, which is remarkable for being, it's self-organized by like, it's remarkable because it's self-organized by women, even though this is like the part of New York they're in is a Socialist Party stronghold. But the Socialist Party aren't the people who do it. It's the women who are like married in a lot of cases to the Socialist Party, and to some extent are in it, but are sort of operating autonomously. And they do this thing where they sort of like they start setting and enforcing these boycotts of like shops that are deemed to be at like price gouging levels, and they fight the cops and they do a bunch of stuff. And the ones I mentioned in Toronto earlier are interesting because those ones actually do like have an organization in the beginning. But in keeping with sort of the tradition of the bread riot, the organization was the Jewish Women's Labor League, and these are remarkably effective political movements. They win their demands really quickly. I'm going to read one more account because it just rules. Lester Golden and Tema Kaplan have both examined food riots in Barcelona in 1918, part of a wave of riots which occurred between June 1917 and March 1919 throughout Spain. As in previous cases, these riots erupted because of devastating price inflation, a thing we know nothing about now, this time resulting from the post-war collapse of the economy. The participants were all women. They forbade men's participation. And the actions were led first by radical Republicans and then by a small group of female anarcho-syndicalists. The women's demands were simple and straightforward. They demanded lower prices for foods. They attacked bread shops and coal wagons and took over a ship laden with fish. When police and civil guard attempted to break out crowds of women on the street, the women turned on them, stripping some of the officers of their pants, spanking or thrashing them, and sending them home.
Yes.
It rules so much.
That's mwah. Nom 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 nom.
It's so good.
Perfect. This is the energy we need in every century that human beings have ever inhabited.
It's amazing. The historian's parenthetical note after that is, quote, rather undermining their authority in the process, which, yes.
I would imagine so, yes. If you are being spanked by a crowd, you have lost control of that crowd. That is fair to say.
And so it takes about 3 weeks, and they win, and prices drop 30%. So good for them.
That's a pretty solid look. Hey, I think most of the people listening would do some hardcore spanking if they could get a 30% cut on their grocery bill.
Yeah, it's a look. I'm just saying, it is much harder to pull down a modern cop's trousers because they're wearing like so much weird shit on top of it. But
belt technology has improved tremendously since then.
Yeah. However, where there is a will, there's a way.
Yep. If I learned one thing from high school, it's that anyone can be pantsed.
You just have to want it hard enough. You have to want it more than the person wants to be wearing their pants.
That's right. You have to believe.
So there's one more of these bread riots that's worth talking about, which also is not conventionally framed as a bread riot, but is entirely keeping with everything I've said here. The February Revolution in Russia. So the February Revolution is the revolution that actually overthrows the Tsar. There's another revolution, which is the October Revolution, which is the one where the Bolsheviks come to power, but that's a separate one. They're fighting a completely different group of people. The February Revolution has all of the sort of key factors of a bread riot, right? There's these massive bread lines. Women are pissed off by the lack of food. The revolution itself is led by women whose like male comrades had literally told them don't go out and do a protest on that day because this is International Women's Day. But the all of the men who are like doing this are convinced that like the conditions aren't right for revolution, so they try to get everyone to stay home, and everyone's just like no. And, you know, like the sort of key difference between this bread riot and the other bread riots we've been talking about is that, you know, the demands of the March on International Women's Day in 1917 are overtly political. Like they are chanting down with the Tsar and they are trying to overthrow the government. And this, you know, this is another thing that has this sort of like incredible impact on how the Bolshevik Revolution is sort of working, right? Like, Lenin winds up using peace, bread, and land as one of the sort of like central like Bolshevik slogans because a huge part of what the revolution is just a bread riot. And that's where we're gonna leave it today, with the world just completely and utterly transformed by another bread riot. And next episode we're gonna get to the modern bread riots because those are also interesting. And yeah, we're gonna once again prove everyone who insists that bread riots don't happen anymore wrong. A thing that I didn't know existed until I started reading this and I'm now incredibly mad about.
Yeah. So go out there and have a bread riot.
Pants a cop.
Or some other kind of riot, you know, a guacamole riot, a mate riot. You could have some kind of corn riot. You could have a riot over ortolan. That would be a unique kind of riot. Don't think anyone's ever rioted over that bird, that's such a beautiful songbird that eating it is a sin. So you have to like hide your shame underneath a sheet so God doesn't see you eat it. Have a riot over one of those, you know?
Yeah, do that.
Yep.
Hi, this is Jo Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveller said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
In 2023, a story gripped the UK, evoking horror and disbelief.
The nurse who should have been in charge of caring for tiny babies is now the most prolific child killer in modern British history.
Everyone thought they knew how it ended. A verdict, a villain, a nurse named Lucy Letby.
Lucy Letby has been found guilty.
But what if we didn't get the whole story?
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we follow the evidence and hear from the people that lived it to ask what really happened when the world decided who Lucy Letby was.
No voicing of any skepticism or doubt.
It'll cause so much harm at every single level of the British establishment of this is wrong.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
China's Ministry of State Security is one of the most mysterious and powerful spy agencies in the world. But in 2017, the FBI got inside.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
This MSS officer has no idea the U.S. government is onto him. But the FBI has his chats, texts, emails, even his personal diary. Hear how they got it on the 6th Bureau podcast.
I now have several terabytes of an MSS officer, no doubt, no question, of his life. And that's a unicorn.
No one had ever seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
This is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the 6th Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Echard, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first Bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Please search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I love how often the Holocaust has been trending over the last year. That's good. That's a thing you want to see trending in 2022. It could happen here. All right, Chris, continue with your bread riots.
Yeah, we're back. There's more riots. Now, last episode, we talked about historians declaring the end of the death of the bread riot. And like in the 60s and early 70s, like I think that this is one of the ways that you can tell that period people genuinely thought the world was going to get better, was that like they genuinely believed that like the centralized state and like capitalism can always provide food. So you want to have bread riots anymore. You get Marxists calling.
If you were born in that period, you like grew up and people were fleeing from Deinonychuses in the street and like getting eaten by woolly mammoths. And then by the time you're 40, you've got the telegraph. So I get it, right? I get why people think that progress was really good back in those areas, because they wiped out the Deinonychuses.
Yeah, I mean, you have seen Howard Taft building the pyramids.
Right,
this
exactly.
You have seen the future rise up literally in front of you, and
you went from eating mud to Hershey's chocolate.
It's an incredibly impressive sort of period of modern historical evolution. And one of the things you see, like you'll see like Marxists calling bread riots primitive rebels doing like populist mob politics that's been like displaced by proper Marxist class politics, and then like every single one of these people was like the most wrong anyone, like basically from that period until the moment the end of history guy starts writing, they are the most wrong people like on the planet.
Well, it's also funny to hear that idea that like there was something primitive about these people's class analysis, because if you look at like the brothers Gracchi in ancient Republican Rome, a lot of the shit they're saying is not at all primitive class analysis. Like it's pretty developed.
Yeah, and I mean like the Marxists will do some long argument about how like they have false consciousness, they're not trying to abolish the class system or whatever, and it's like, well, I mean like I look at the Marxists didn't abolish the class system either, so like but like these are very, and this is something we're going to be coming back to a lot this episode, is that the people doing this are incredibly sophisticated political actors. And one of the sort of modern version of this is in the 1970s. Not only did bread riots not end, there's a new kind of bread riot, and these riots are collectively known as the IMF riots. From January 1976 to October 1992, there were riots in Peru, Egypt, Ghana, Jamaica, Liberia, the Philippines, Zaire, Turkey, Morocco, Sierra Leone, Sudan, Argentina, Ecuador, Chile, Bolivia, Brazil, Panama, Tunisia, Dominican Republic, Haiti, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Mexico, Yugoslavia, Zambia, Poland, Algeria, Romania, Nigeria, Hungary, Venezuela, Jordan, the Ivory Coast, Niger, Iran, Albania, India, and Nepal.
Were you just doing like the wacko Warner song?
That's literally all the I found the chart that has all of them. It's like there's just so many. They just keep happening. And again, that's only until 1992. Like they're still happening. And the other thing I should mention is those are just the ones that are called the IMF riots. There's a bunch of other riots, some of which are bread riots, that aren't called the IMF riots because they're not really sort of like directly involved with the IMF. And this raises the question of what the fuck is an IMF riot? And the answer is that, unfortunately, to understand why people are throwing Molotovs through bank windows, we have to talk about banking a little bit. I have talked, I guess, at length. Yeah, I apologize, but we will get back to the riots. Damn it, I promise. We just have to do a little bit of banking. So yeah, I've talked extensively on the show about the crisis of the 70s, and the short version is that in a thing that is completely unrecognizable today, the global economy collapses, inflation skyrockets. Countries across the global south start taking out these adjustable rate. Well, they've been taking out these adjustable rate loans, and then suddenly their interest rates spike, and they start defaulting on these loans. Here's free markets and food riots talking about it. Although the causes of the crisis run deeper, by the 1970s, many smaller nations began to feel the strains of insolvency as a result of a worldwide recession, successive oil price shocks, declining world commodity prices, and accelerating debt service obligations. So basically, like if you're a small country, right? The price of everything you need to buy, like oil, is going up, and the price of what you can sell, which is like commodities like copper or tin, is collapsing. And these lead to what are like these massive, what are called balance of payments crises. And so we should talk about what a balance of payments crisis is. And this winds up being really important here. There's the story about Che Guevara, literally right after the Cuban Revolution. So he goes to the U.S. and he's in this meeting with a bunch of bankers, and he's trying basically to get Cuba's gold reserves and Cuba's sort of like foreign exchange reserves out of the U.S. The U.S. doesn't steal it. And what's funny about it is all of the bankers who are talking to him, all of them report afterwards, like, well, wow, this guy talks like a banker, not a communist. And the specifically the reason they were like, oh, hey, this guy talks like a banker is that he knew what balance of payments was. The short answer is that a balance of payments crisis is when there's more money flowing out of the country than is coming into it. And the result of this is that you run out of money. And particularly the thing you run out of is American dollars, which is the thing that you need to like buy oil. So you get these countries that are massively in debt and they run out of money. And the only thing they can do is turn to the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, who, like, the only description of the IMF that I have is that, like, they're basically like if the cartoon Bank of Evil from Despicable Me, like, ran the entire world economy. so the IMF shows up to these countries and is like, lol, Lamau, eat shit. And they force these countries to implement, like, in order to get loans, they force them to implement what are called stabilization programs because of the, quote, conditionality of the loans. They have all these, like, this really technical, boring, like, neoliberal, like, legal language for it. This is all sort of banker speak for, if you want another loan so you can buy food, you're gonna have to rob every single person you know and hand us all your money. This eventually becomes known as structural adjustment programs. There's all of this sort of technical language disguise what's going on. But what's actually going on is that in order to pay the bankers for these loans, they are taking food from the mouths of children. Here's a more technical, I guess, explanation of what's happening here. Austerity programs include stern measures or shock treatments that trigger market mechanisms to stimulate export production and increase government foreign exchange reserves. So, according to the theory, currency devaluation makes third world exports more competitive in the international market. Reduced public spending curbs inflation and saves money for debt repayment. Privatization of state-owned corporations generate more productive investment and reduce public payrolls. Elimination of protectionism and other restraints on foreign investment lures more efficient export firms. Cuts in public subsidies for food and basic necessities help to get prices right, benefiting domestic producers. Wage restraints and higher interest rates reduce inflation and enhance competitiveness, and import restrictions conserve foreign exchange for debt servicing. So this has winners and losers, and the losers are like everyone in the country this is happening to. This is pretty cross-class. Like, these policies, they hurt workers, they hurt peasants, they hurt small shopkeepers. The middle class is annihilated. Just like people who are consumers who buy goods, and even the sort of like the local capitalists just get screwed by this. Because what the IMF is doing is forcing everyone to have lower wages, taking massive benefit cuts, and massively spiking the price of food. And I once again remind everyone that this is explicitly what the Federal Reserve is trying to do to us right now. Like, this is the kind of stuff that they're talking about in order to curb inflation, is to just pay everyone less, make everyone take benefits cuts, and then increase the price of shit. So the winners of this are like 6 bureaucrats, international investors, and like a class of like absolutely horrific large agricultural landowners. And this has about the effect that you would expect it to. Between 1976 and late 1992, some 146 incidents of protest occurred, reaching a peak from 1983 to 1985 and continuing to the present without attenuation. Now, the authors who are writing this, right, they're writing this in 1994. So when they say they continue to the present without attenuation, they mean 1994. The thing is, the last one of those riots ended like a week ago.
Oh. Huh.
Yeah, they're still going. So, and these riots are slightly different than the sort of like classical bread riots, right? Because they are about the increasing price of food. They're also about the increasing price of fuel, or sort of broader austerity measures, so cuts to services, stuff like that. Here's a quote about like what these things actually look like. Demonstrations and riots typically target specific institutions perceived as responsible for the depredations. Marches and protesting crowds converge on major thoroughfares and government buildings such as the Treasury or the National Bank or the Legislature or the Presidential Palace. Looters attack supermarkets and clothing stores. Where fuel and transportation subsidies are part of the austerity package, buses and gasoline stations are burned. The international dimension of austerity are recognized symbolically in attacks on travel agencies, foreign automobiles, luxury hotels, and international travel agencies, or well, that too, but also international agency offices. And this is going to sound familiar from last episode. It turns out that just like the 18th century people, the attacks of these things are very targeted. The sort of like forms of resistance have changed over time because this is now we do have modern political organizations, right? Like we get general strikes. Sometimes you get just normal bread riots. Sometimes you get these just things that are like large protests and then they turn into riots. And what's interesting about them is that these are very sort of cross-class movements, right? You have your sort of classical sectors of the urban poor. You have like particularly in the global south, you have your shanty dwellers, you have unemployed youth, you have small street vendors who are like a crucial sort of element of these things. You have like just your guy selling cigarettes on the street. You also get like parts of the industrial working class. Sometimes you get unions. A lot of times you get students. You get like public employees. Sometimes you get professional groups. One of the interesting things I was reading about this, I've read like a few books in this era who were talking specifically, and this is in like the 90s, right? We're specifically talking about professional groups in Sudan. And it's like okay, it's 1994. People are talking about professional groups in Sudan backing rioters against the government. It's 2019. People are talking about professional groups backing protests against the government. I don't know. Like there's this extent to which all of these things, like the IMF riots, have just been happening over and over and over again for about 50 years, and a lot of the elements are incredibly similar. One of the other things that's going on here is that these protests are driven by mass urbanization. Typically, austerity protests were precipitated by dramatic overnight price hikes resulting from the termination of public subsidies on basic goods and services, proclaimed by the government as a regrettably necessary reform urged by the IMF and international lenders as conditions for new and renegotiated loans. 5 deaths in the first Peruvian protest began a pattern of violence. Peru remained a hotbed of austerity protests, with students and workers demonstrating against increased food prices in 1997, followed in 1978 by a march of public employees over state layoffs. This protest, though cheered by other public workers watching from surrounding office buildings, was dispersed by police tear gas. So, like that's a very sort of
yeah.
Like this was happening. This was happening in Peru like last year, right? Actually, was it last year or was it earlier this year? I don't know. Time is fake. And that's actually like the other thing that's sort of startling about this is like the places that riot are still the places that are rioting in like in an enormous number of cases. It's the same places. Sometimes it's the same people. I think probably the most famous protest of this sort of era it's called the Caracazo. I'm pronouncing that extremely badly, but my apologies. In Venezuela, which is a reaction to a 1989 like 50 to 100% increase in train and bus fares. And these are massive riots. At least 100 and probably like a couple of thousand people are like gunned down by the army. And 3 years later, a relatively unknown colonel named Hugo Chavez tried to overthrow the government that had carried out the price increases. Chavez is better known for his other works, but he's the sort of tie between the IMF riots and the sort of next phase of political resistance to this stuff, which is like known as the anti-globalization movement in the sort of the 90s and early 2000s. And the thing that's interesting about these things is that, I don't know, the IMF riots don't go very well. Like, either they lose, or at best what they were able to get was like temporarily stall some of these reforms. And I say like reforms, quote unquote, like the sort of neoliberal, like slashing benefits stuff. They were able to pause them a bit, and then they would sort of get restarted after people left the street. But in the late 90s and early 2000s, people start winning. Argentina is sort of famously forced to like tell the IMF to fuck off, and they default on their loans after this like enormous autonomous uprising in 2001 that like very nearly overthrows the government and forces out like 5 heads of state. There's the whole sort of pink tide in Latin America. The IMF gets like driven out of a bunch of countries in East Asia. And then in 2008, the entire world economy collapses, which it turns out is bad for everyone. And this does 2 things for our story. The first is that like countries are suddenly going broke again. And because they're just completely broke, the IMF is just back and is able to sort of enforce programs on places like Greece and Spain. And the second thing it did was set off an enormous wave of bread riots and uprisings. And I think like most people, if you tell them that 2008 set off like an enormous wave of like protests, they're immediately going to go, oh, you mean the Arab Spring? And I am talking about that, but that's actually not specifically what I'm talking about here. There were like immediately in 2007, 2008, immediately after, there was another massive wave of bread riots that everyone has completely forgotten, unless the thing that you do specifically is study bread riots. Here's from a piece called "A Political Economy of the Food Riot." In 2007 and 2008, the world witnessed a return of one of the oldest forms of collective action, the food riot. Countries where protests occurred ranged from Italy, where pasta protests in September 2007 were directed at the failure of the Prodi government to prevent a 30% rise in the price of pasta, to Haiti, where protesters railed against President Préval's impassive response to the doubling of the price of rice over the course of a single week. Other countries in which riots were reported, including Uzbekistan, Morocco, Guyana, Mauritania, Senegal, India, Indonesia, Zimbabwe, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Yemen, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Mexico, and Argentina. And some commentators have estimated that 30 countries experienced some sort of food protest over the period. Now, we've been talking a lot about like food consumers in this because that's mostly the people who are involved in bread riots. But, you know, as was happening in the 1700s with the sort of original stuff, like this whole time this is going on, there's a sort of massive shift in the global food economy happening where, and this has been happening for a long time now, but it's been accelerating in the last about half a century, which is that the number of people who are like peasants and who produce food for themselves has been massively declining, and people are getting forced into cities. And this means that there's, you know, there's been a number of other things that have gone along with this. There's been this massive increase in like cattle production, for example. You get all these monocultures. And another thing I think I've mentioned before is the World Trade Organization's like agreement on agriculture, like outlaws agricultural subsidies for the global South. But, you know, the US is still allowed to have like farm subsidies, which means that, you know, if when you enter these free trade agreements, you get all of this like enormously cheap food from the US that's dumped into all these other countries. And, you know, if you're a Mexican farmer, suddenly you can't compete with all of this food from the US because the food from the US is cheap because the American government's subsidizing it, but the Mexican government can't. And this just like absolutely annihilates any attempt by a country to maintain food security by like producing food for themselves. And this sort of class of like self-sufficient peasant farmers who'd been, you know, they support themselves by producing their own food and selling to the market. These people just get annihilated, and they get forced into what's called sort of casualized labor. The later version of this is like Uber, right? But they're forced into gig work. They're kicked out of sort of the normal economy. And, you know, because they don't have sort of fixed contracts or, you know, a lot of these people are working with no contracts at all. They're enormously insecure. And once these people are forced into the labor market, like changes in the global economy can make them like almost immediately unable to afford food. Because, you know, like if the less sort of economically secure you are, the more you're affected by price increases, which is obvious, but it's worth saying because it dictates a lot of like who does bread riots. And yes, and so governments are not entirely like blind to this, and their concern is that they're going to get overthrown. And so you see a bunch of governments trying to respond with sort of price stabilization stuff. I think the most famous example of this is that like the Egyptian army like literally controls like an enormous number of Egypt's bakeries, and they like directly run them, and they directly run them so they can control the price of bread to try to like stop revolutions from happening. But in 2008, they just kind of stopped working. Here's the political economy of the food riot again. Over the year between 2007 and 2008, the 130% increase in the global price of maize and the 75% increase in the price of rice, with similar price increases in soybeans and other major food commodities. So there are these massive food price increases, and this, you know, this does the thing that massive food price increases does, right? There's immediately enormous riots, and there's this cycle that happens where the protesters immediately blame the government for the crisis. And then the government is like, well, it's actually not our fault because, it's happening because of things outside of our control. And the protesters are like, oh, it doesn't matter who we elect. They do the same things. And like, they're both kind of right. Like the government is just like fucking these people, but it's also true that the sort of like the whole food system is designed to take like the means of food production out of the hands of like the workers who need the food, and putting them in the hands of like, you know, enormous corporations. And as people in places like Sri Lanka, which we're going to talk more about later, continually emphasize it, like this food sovereignty issue is as much of a political issue. Like it's an incredibly political issue, and it's as much like what's at stake in these bread riots as the sort of IMF and austerity stuff. Okay, this is probably a good place for an ad break, but I can't think of a transition.
Yeah, you know who isn't allowed to eat is the products and services that support this podcast, all actively starving to death. So get these deals now while you still can.
And we're back. So All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about the Arab Spring. We're not going to talk an enormous amount about it because that's a whole thing. But if you've been following like the stuff people have written about the Arab Spring, there's an enormous number of people who spend like a lot of their time arguing about whether or not it was actually sparked by food prices. And, you know, you'll get a lot of analysts who argue that like food prices in Tunisia, where the Arab Spring starts, like weren't really higher than normal. And what you're seeing instead is like, well, it's not actually food prices. It's just that there's a generation of people who've been farmers, but like can't support themselves anymore, who've been forced into like finding non-existent wage labor in cities. And like that is part of what's happening. But I think there's a sort of like fundamental misunderstanding of what causes a bread riot, right? Like, you know, as you talked about in the first episode, one of the things that causes bread riots is it's not actually necessarily the magnitude of the price increase that causes them, right? What sets off bread riots is people feeling like they're not getting what they deserve. Now, obviously, like if the price of bread increases by 200%, you're going to get a lot of people going like, "Fuck this! I worked my ass off and now I can't feed my family. We deserve better than this. It's time to riot." But sometimes, even if bread prices are stable, you can get a thing where everyone, like, you know, the amount of bread is bad, everything is expensive, and one day someone wakes up and just goes, "Fuck this! I deserve better," and they do a bread riot. And this is the case, and you know, and when that kind of thing is happening, right? When you're dealing with, you know, what like moral economy stuff, when you're dealing with this gap between like what people think like what people think their life should be versus the fact that their lives are just absolutely terrible. Even if you like decrease the price of bread, that's not actually necessarily going to like stop people from rioting. And if you look at like Occupy, for example, too, like, you know, that's also happening in this period. Like, what brings people there isn't necessarily strictly the price of food. It's the sense that like, yeah, I've been screwed by the ruling class, and I deserve better than this. And this is what you see in Tunisia, and one of the things what you see in sort of Tunisia and Syria is that like a lot of the uprisings, like they have this huge sort of rural core with this huge population of people who've been kicked out of the agricultural sector, and you know, and like that is a bread riot, right? And it's a bread riot in the sort of double sense of like it's the people who are involved, who used to be involved in grain production and now can't be, and then also that like, you know, people have hit this sort of expectation gap thing. And what I think is sort of interesting about this is that these bread riots, these rural bread riots, are like they're the closest thing we have to sort of the classical 20th century revolution, right? Like that's the thing that causes. Like the 20th century revolutions are the first generation of people who are like, maybe the first like 2 or 3 generations of people who come from the countryside into the factories are the people who do revolutions. But the thing is, this is the 21st century, not the 20th century. Like if you get kicked out of your farm, there's no job in a factory. Like you're just unemployed. And you know, and this changes the dynamics of sort of everything. And I think. Okay, like people like broadly know the course of like the Arab Spring and the 2011-2014 wave of uprisings. They happen, they get crushed largely. But there was another wave of these sort of riots, protests, and uprisings that started in Haiti in mid-2018 over this massive fuel price hike. And here is a partial list of places that like people have like rioted in large numbers since 2018. Haiti, Sudan, Algeria, Honduras, Chile, Iraq, Hong Kong, Iran like 4 times, Lebanon like 3 times, Colombia like 3 times. A couple of things happened in France. There was Puerto Rico. There was Papua. There was Indonesia. We're on our second Ecuador one now. There was Catalonia. Like people rioted in the U.S. There were massive indigenous roadblocks like in Canada. Eucomedia Campo went up. Like, there was stuff in Socotra. Like there were 2 different ways of protest in India. There was like Belarus. There was Kazakhstan. There was Kyrgyzstan. There was Uzbekistan. There's Mali. There's stuff in Nigeria. There's stuff in Libya. Like there's stuff in Sri Lanka we're about to get to. This whole thing has been happening like everywhere, and it's been intensifying in the last sort of like 3 or 4 years. We're now basically in like year 4 of this cycle, and you know, obviously like every single one of these protests has their own like local political conditions, and like a lot of these aren't even sort of loosely about the price of bread. They're just about sort of other stuff that's happening. But like of the uprisings that I mentioned, like something like 15 of them are directly about the price of food or the price of like transited fuel. And we're going to talk a little bit about sort of 2 of the most recent like protest waves. We're going to talk about Ecuador and we're going to talk about Sri Lanka, because they're 2 very different kinds of protests, even though they're both kind of bread riots. or at least they're both very much the modern equivalents of it. But they look very different, and there's just I think there's like interesting reasons why. Yeah, so we're gonna start with Sri Lanka. On a very basic level, Sri Lanka has a giant balance of payments crisis. This is, in some sense, like this is the sort of like large scale political version of famines, right? Like there's plenty of food and fuel in the world, but the government of Sri Lanka does not have dollars to buy it with. Now, the reason the government doesn't have dollars to like buy fuel with is because the government is basically an incredibly corrupt dictatorship that keeps like importing luxury goods it didn't need, and they did a bunch of like tax breaks on rich people, and suddenly the government was broke, and everyone was like, "Wow, how did that happen? It must have just been the pandemic." And it was like, "No, you gave all the money to rich people." And then, like as the crisis sort of went on, the government decided to ban fertilizer imports. And so this just meant that people couldn't get fertilizer. So it's like farmers just didn't plant food because they didn't have fertilizer.
That's a curious decision.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things you look at it. It's just like who thought this was a good idea?
Yeah, what was the positive end of that game plan here?
I mean, I think what they were thinking is that like fertilizer costs dollars, right? We're running out of dollars, so we're going to stop people from spending their dollars like on buying this stuff so we can keep more dollars in the economy. But like, what is your long-term plan here if you don't have like anything to get dollars with, and you also don't have food? So this, to the surprise of exactly 0 people, except I guess the government of Sri Lanka, causes a food crisis and a food shortage. And this is a kind of classic, like this is a kind of classic like situation in which the IMF would intervene in the 70s, and they're intervening now. And this is a classic like struggle against this starting, right? You have the ruling class blowing up the entire economy by like fueling debt money into pointless infrastructure projects, and now they're doing these like massive austerity measures and trying to get loans from the IMF. This is stuff we understand and we've seen before. But this is also a food sovereignty problem, right? The Sri Lankan government has just completely screwed their farmers, which means they have to import even more food. And the result of this is months and months and months of very impressive sort of cross-class protests with like basically every social sector in the streets. And that's both a good thing and also a thing that is kind of a mess because, like there was civil war. The Civil War ended like less than a decade and a half ago, right? So you have people in the streets from sectors who like do not like each other at all. And I don't know, you get the thing that happens here, right? You get these moments of like incredible solidarity and then moments of incredible, like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And, like one of the things that happens a lot in these protests, like in all protests like this, is like, okay, the protests are like pretty tame for literally months, right? Like it's just people doing protesting. And then cops and people like allied with the government start attacking the protesters. At which point, people like burn down the house of the ruling family. They start throwing people. I think people probably saw the videos. People like throwing cars of like government ministers into rivers, which was a good time. And like, yeah, like that stuff was a direct reaction to sort of like the government's violence, right? Okay, I can't give like a full like detailed political history here because like, dear God, it is incredibly complicated and I don't understand it very well because. I don't study Sri Lanka. If you want a good account of this, Rohini Hensman's Political Dimensions of the Crisis in Sri Lanka is a really good sort of like short like look at what's going on here. And this is a sort of like this is a broader trend in like all of these protests, right? Like every single bread riot takes place in its own unique context. Like Sri Lanka, for example, like Sri Lanka used to have the world's best and largest like mass Trotskyite party. Like they were the Trotskyites. This is like the only place on earth. The Trotskyites had like a real like mass political party, and they were like a part of the real political process. And then they like sold out the working class and entered a bunch of governments that like did terrible stuff. And okay, that's like a local context. Doesn't happen anywhere else. But every single one of these states, right, is embedded in global capitalism, and that means that every state is affected by the sort of like broader economic trends and sort of bureaucratic structures that hold everything together. They're affected by the IMF, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank. And the thing that this means is that the timings of uprisings and riots tend to synchronize with each other in reaction to sort of broader like economic forces. And the product of this is these sort of like periodic waves of uprisings. And so to close this out, we're going to talk about the most recent of these. Well, it might actually not be the most recent of these by the time this goes up. But
yeah,
we're going to talk about Ecuador. The situation in Ecuador is very different from what's happening in Sri Lanka. The biggest difference, I guess, is that instead of sort of like waiting for conditions to get bad enough that like an uprising happens like more or less spontaneously, which is kind of what happened in 2019 in Ecuador. There's a very huge protest there, but they were largely spontaneous. But instead of like waiting for it, people were just like, wait, what if we just called one of these? And by people here, I specifically mean the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, or CONAIE. And okay. As we've seen through this whole sort of thing, right? Like bread riots, like adapt to the political organizations around them. And in Ecuador, we're dealing with a quintessentially modern form of political organization, which is the Indigenous Confederation. And I guess I should sort of like preface this a bit with like the specific form of Indigenous Confederation in Latin America that emerges in this period is like a different thing than older ones, because there have been Indigenous Confederations for a long time. This is a very specific like political thing that emerged across Latin America in sort of the 70s and the 80s. Well, really started showing up in the 80s as a result of like a lot of things. One of which was like how shitty the old like Marxist-Leninist vanguard groups like were on indigenous issues. And one of the groups that forms in this period is CONAIE, and CONAIE is one of the world's most militant like indigenous federations. And since their founding in 1986, they've called half a dozen uprisings against neoliberal governments, and I think they knocked off like 3 presidents, which is a pretty impressive track record. And on July 13th, 2022, faced with skyrocketing inflation on like basic consumer goods and a like really shitty like far right government, they staged another one. And this is another sort of, I don't know, like the thing that's interesting about this is that it's part general strike, like part street protest, part riot, and part just like mass march from the sort of periphery of Ecuador to the core. And by periphery and core, I mean in the sort of metaphorical sense. Like it's a bunch of indigenous and peasant groups from all over the country just like marching on, descending on the capital, Quito. And this is a complicated process. Like like the left everywhere has like political divides, and mostly they're kind of nonsense in a lot of ways. Like, okay, like there's ideological divides and there's personal divides and whatever, but like Ecuador's left has real political divides, and these aren't like sort of petty ideological, like personal stuff. Like they were caught under the sort of previous like old like leftist pink tie governments of Rafael Correa. Like there are like soldiers and cops who are beating the shit out of indigenous ecological protesters. And, this means that like, okay, so Carrera's like party's running for president again, or Carrera's not running, but Carrera's party is like running in an election. Right. And, this means that like, yeah, okay, like maybe you're both leftist, right? But, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, fuck no, like I'm not voting for these guys. These are the guys who like sent the army against our anti-mining protests. And so, the thing that's interesting here is that like these protests don't even pull together the entire Ecuadorian left. There's like other stuff going on here too. Like there's some of the unions that went on strike in 2019, like don't go on strike this time because of some like, political stuff that's happening. But the thing about CONAIE that's really impressive is that they're still organized enough, and they're organized enough that they're able to just take control of parts of cities. And they have a lot of allies and supporters among sort of students and workers in Quito. And this means that when the government makes this enormous mistake and arrests CONAIE's like kind of newish leader, okay, this guy's name, I guess in Spanish, it's like Leonidas Aiza. This guy's name is Leonidas. And he's the head of he's the head of CONAIE's Indigenous Federation. And he's been a protest leader. He was a protest leader in 2019. That's how he got elected to like head this organization. And they arrest him on day 2 of the protest. And this is a catastrophic mistake. The protests just like explode. And, by like a week in, I think that the government's claiming they were doing $50 million of damage a day, which I'm not actually sure I believe that, because governments and corporations do this too when they're talking about like losses from like strikes. They tend to overemphasize how much damage is done because it makes them like look better in the press and it makes the protesters look worse. But they're able to damage like significant parts of the economy. And by June 30th, like they kind of win. Basically, the government's forced to negotiate with them, and they don't get all of their demands, but they get price decreases for like fuel and gasoline, which is like a huge part of why these protests happen in the first place. They get bans on mining and drilling in indigenous or protected areas. They get like strengthened price controls. They get like rural loan forgiveness, like interest rate decreases. They get subsidies for farmers. They get subsidies for families. They manage to get the government to like declare a state of a health emergency over COVID. It's like this is impressive stuff. And you know, and the other part of this is that they're like, okay, the agreement is that we will stop protesting if you do this, and if you don't do this, we're going to do this again.
Cool.
So, yeah, I guess to sort of wrap this up, there's an American proverb that is really common among sort of like American China watchers, which is that so supposedly the Chinese word for crisis is composed of two characters, danger and opportunity. And it's like not true. As like linguistic and anthropological analysis of China, that's not what the characters mean. But everyone in the U.S. like political establishment like believes this, right? And you know, but like as an analysis of China, it is completely useless. As an analysis of the U.S. of the American psyche, it's incredibly valuable, right? Because this is the way the American ruling class thinks. It's every single crisis is both a danger and an opportunity, and that's something that we, in some sense, also have to do because that's, you know, these are the sort of situations that we're in, right? Bread riots are a thing that just, they happen, right? They will continue to happen. They have been happening for thousands of years. Like, presumably they will happen for thousands of more years. And there's no use sort of like either pretending that they don't happen or making these sort of moral or tactical arguments like for or against them because they just happen. And the question that we're faced with is, what are we actually going to do about it, right? Are we going to sit them out? Are we going to side with the state and repressing them in the name of sort of like stamping out color revolutions or like providing order or stability or like protecting small businesses? Or are we going to, you know, take to the streets and fight alongside them to sort of break the system that creates them? And the second question from here is, if we're going to do this, how? And what we've seen from Ecuador in the past month or so is that if you take the fight to them and you are sufficiently organized, you can win. And that means the question now, as our food prices continue to increase, as food prices are only going to continue to increase, what are we going to do? And yeah, that's all I got. I have a single question.
Yep. What are we going to do? Well,
I'm kind of bummed we never brought up our good friend Pete Buttigieg and his bread price fixing ordeals.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a sign of just like how kind of like, I guess you could say, masculinized like our culture has been, that like people didn't riot over that. Cause like that is a thing. Like if you send Pete Buttigieg back to like a late 1700 French village, and he tries to do this thing, like he does a systematic like bread price fixing, right? Like all of these people would have been getting hit by rocks. So yeah, do that again. Yeah.
Do that again. Wow.
Do that again.
Just brazen incitement.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, that is it for us today.
We love to incite things, folks. Until next time, go incite yourselves.
China's Ministry of State Security is one of the most mysterious and powerful spy agencies in the world. But in 2017, the FBI got inside.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
This MSS officer has no idea the U.S. government is onto him. But the FBI has his chats, texts, emails, even his personal diary. Hear how they got it on the 6th Bureau podcast.
I now have several terabytes of an MSS officer, no doubt, no question, of his life. And that's a unicorn.
No one had ever seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
This is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to The Sixth Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
In 2023, a story gripped the UK, evoking horror and disbelief.
The nurse who should have been in charge of caring for tiny babies is now the most prolific child killer in modern British history.
Everyone thought they knew how it ended. A verdict, a villain, a nurse named Lucy Letby.
Lucy Letby has been found guilty.
But what if we didn't get the whole story?
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we follow the evidence and hear from the people that lived it to ask what really happened when the world decided who Lucy Letby was.
No voicing of any skepticism or doubt.
It'll cause so much harm at every single level of the British establishment of this is wrong.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveller said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom-loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Police search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to It Could Happen Here, the podcast that's increasingly about things that are actually kind of already happening. And today it's gonna be one of those. We're talking about the uptick in rhetoric around queer exterminationism that's happened. Most of the stuff is what is discussions and legislative proposal and rhetoric that was really kicked off last month during Pride Month, specifically because of the Roe v. Wade ruling that really opened the door on a few not good possibilities. But because we're going to be talking about some more grim stuff today, we're gonna open with something slightly more funny, and that's friend of the pod, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. Now, with me today is Chris and James. Greetings.
Hi.
So, Peterson, he got really mad at Elliot Page, and now does not really have a Twitter account, and it's pretty funny. And a few days after he was banned for continuing to misgender Elliot Page, he released a video that can only be described as a supervillain monologue. as a part of his new partnership with Daily Wire Plus, the hit new streaming service. And just because I think it's funny, we're just gonna play a few clips of this evil supervillain monologue because it's really funny, and then it'll circle back to kind of our topic towards the end. So, speaking of friend of the pod Peterson, here's our one of the clips that's you've probably already heard if you're terminally online, but it's incredibly funny.
If I am required to acknowledge that my tweet violated the Twitter rules. What rules, you sons of bitches?
Good old Peterson.
You know, the thing I've always been sort of like, that clip in particular, it's like, I don't know if I was trying, I don't know if I could emulate just this, it sounding like you've edited together 16 clips of yourself.
I know, right? My tweet violated the Twitter rules. It's like, his speech pattern is so bizarre. And also, like, the video was like 9 minutes long. Like, preceding that line, he explained what rule he broke around misgendering and harassment. So, like, he explained the exact rule. But we always get more Peterson if you ask for it.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Extremely funny.
He's actually sneering as well. If you watch the video, like his whole face just
he is going all in on the bit. He's doing like Ozymandias but hammed up. It's frankly impressive. This one's also a decent one.
I am employing this awkward and impossible naming style because it is now apparently mandatory, and am probably doing it wrong nonetheless, as you're doing it wrong is the whole point of what has been made mandatory. But also, I'm trying to make a point. I've essentially been banned from Twitter as a consequence. I say banned, although technically I have been suspended. But the suspension will not be lifted unless I delete the hateful tweet in question, and I would rather die than do that.
I would rather die.
That means that you have a healthy relationship to the platform of Twitter. There's also this great clip of him talking about how, like, I'm actually happy how my Twitter account is gone now. Twitter is insignificant in the final analysis. And you're like, what the fuck does that mean? What final analysis are you talking about? What do you mean the final analysis of what? What is? It's pretty funny. There's two more clips from this rant that I want to do, which kind of are going to get more to the heart of our issue today.
Great.
They're not great. They actually they kind of suck. So without further ado, here's our good doctor friend.
And finally, with regard to the final phrase, criminal physician, I must say that I've had some post-coital, so to speak, regrets about that phrase. It is clearly the case that the surgical operation performed by the butchers who butchered Elliot/Ellen was legal. So, was it criminal or not? Were the operations undertaken by the fascist physicians who carried out the Nazi medical experiments legal? Yes, under the laws of the time. But were they criminal? I'll leave that question up to you to answer.
So that's pretty gross for a lot of reasons. One, the kind of historical context of using Nazis to compare to your own transphobia is a little dicey when you consider what the Nazis did to trans people and to queer books.
He's advocating for the Nazi position here.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
There's been so many bans on queer books just in the past 2 years. The Library Association tracked almost 1,600 books that were challenged in 2021, the highest number since the organization began tracking book bans in the past 20 years. So talking about the Nazi scientists. They're like, you have his historical context of obviously is incredibly lacking, or he's just a grifter. I think honestly, he's just kind of lost it. I don't even think he's fully a grifter. I think he's just kind of not understanding what's going on anymore. Because you can watch like interviews and stuff where people can try to use reasoning and logic with him, and you can watch his brain start to process it, but it's just like otherwise he just doesn't think in any sort of logical manner or put his words or his like stream of consciousness into any historical context. He just says what he wants, and he's used to people just taking that as a fact. He's used to like regurgitating bad Joseph Campbell and people being like, oh yeah, you sound smart. When no, he's actually not. He's but man, it's yeah, the whole Germany Nazi scientist experimentation thing is incredibly frustrating. I don't even know what else to like say about that, because I mean even that line you could focus on for a while. Be like, compare how like the history of medical documentation of like transness and the Nazis, how that's like such a big thing, is that the Nazis destroyed so much medical research on gender transitions, losing like decades and decades of research that we're only now starting to regain. Incredibly gross. But there's this one last clip I wanted to play of our good doctor.
And are we degenerate in a profoundly threatening manner? I think the answer to that may well be yes.
So that's not great.
He really is like just advocating for the Nazi position at every turn. Like,
yes, he's just continuing to advocate for fascistic reasoning, fascistic views of decadence and degeneracy, in so much as it is a threat to civilization and a threat to Western society. And then he goes on in this clip to justify Russia's invasion of Ukraine because the US is helping Ukraine, which makes Ukraine degenerate by proxy. So Russia's doing a war on degeneracy. And that's his argument. It's like, that's his level of logical reasoning.
Yeah, which is funny because it's like if you ever heard any of the like radio, because every once in a while there'll be radio clips of just like Ukrainian and Russian soldiers yelling at each other, and it's just both of them calling each other gay over and over again. And it's just like, really, like
Jesus
is
Christ. We should
one side is woke.
Bring back that level of discourse to America. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we will come back to talk about our other really close friend of the pod, Matthew Walsh. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, God.
Okay, I have one question for everyone here. How woman? What is that?
Featherless biped.
Okay, great. Behold, a woman. So, when we're talking about Matt Walsh, obviously last month he released a pretty poorly made transphobic documentary that was basically just clips of him getting owned by like actual doctors for not understanding like basic ontology and medical reasoning. The documentary was just other friend of the pod, J.K. Rowling, just expressed support for the documentary. So if that's not an indicator that like TERFism is just like a direct preamble to open fascism, I don't know what is. Because I mean, Matt Walsh jokingly describes himself as a fascist, but that's because his beliefs actually are fascistic. Like he said, it's one of those jokes that only is funny because everyone agrees on the central premise. Like it's that type of humor. So like J.K. Rowling just endorsing an open fascist. So I'm not going to talk about the documentary in depth here because it's not that good and it doesn't really make any points that need to be refuted. It talks about how puberty blockers are sterilization drugs, which is not the case long term. When you're on them, yes, you cannot do that because it's obviously inhibiting your hormones. But once you go off puberty blockers, you can procreate again.
Which also, I just want to take a second here to look at this position, which is that, okay, so puberty blockers are sterilization things, right? Or like, okay, so this is their argument, is sterilization, right? Who are you giving puberty blockers to? Children. Why the fuck do you care?
Well, I mean,
that
like
children. It's like, well, I mean, they're arguing it's like,
the argument
it's like
is that it'll make them permanently sterilized.
But it's
basically like
really
you're castrating these kids by giving them puberty blockers. Which no, that's not how that works. You're just arguing in bad faith. It doesn't matter. But anyway, I don't want to talk about the documentary in length because it's not interesting enough to talk about. But I will.
Is this a documentary, real quick? Is this the one where he like goes to like quote unquote the country of Africa and asks people, and then poorly mistranslates?
Extremely racist.
Yeah. Great to see J.K. Rowling, like known non-racist, lining up.
Yeah.
Like behind these essentialist tropes of African.
The creator of Kingsley Shacklebolt and Cho Chang.
Cho Chang. Yeah, just the most cringe.
That's what we call a rich white woman moment.
Yes.
All right. So, but we are going to talk about some other things Matt Walsh has been doing, specifically how he has increased exterminationist rhetoric into his discussions around trans people. So we're going to open by talking about detransitioners. So the vast majority of real detransitions, which are very rare, like there's very few of them, especially considering there's already very few numbers of trans people. But
isn't it like sub 1% or something?
It's very, very few. But the vast majority of people who do make the choice to detransition are usually due to experiencing aggressive transphobia. And the idea of the detransitioner has been inflated and used as a straw man to attack the trans community just by and large, with many documented cases of TERFs or far-right activists creating like fake sock puppet accounts, pretending to be detransitioners to write like, horrifying but fictional stories. That happens a lot. There's a really famous case on Reddit of an alleged detransitioner who was found out to just be like an alt-right troll. And this all really sucks because the people who do detransition because they realize it's just not for them are generally pretty rad people who continue to be very much pro-trans because they do understand the fluid nature of gender and gender expression through this entire process. Anyways, when quote tweeting an alleged detransitioner expressing regret of medical decisions that they made, Matt Walsh said this, quote, "We can't just oppose the transition of children. Yes, that's particularly evil, but it's also evil to do it to anyone of any age. This young woman was 19, a legal adult, when she was mutilated. Does that make it okay? Obviously not. Put it another way, it should be illegal for doctors to do this to anyone of any age. It should be illegal for anyone of any age to transition, period." So this demonstrates the jump from no one, like the rhetoric of no one should transition until they're an adult to no one should be allowed to transition at all. And it came just as quickly as the trans community was telling you it would. This jump is not a big one. It is very easy to say no hormones until you're 18 to saying no hormones at all. And that's what we're entering into. Walsh's rhetoric is increasingly exterminationist and eliminationist, just saying that like all of his preferred policies would result in the total prohibition of trans identity and the criminalization of any gender affirming care. These people are fundamentally opposed to having any agency of your own body, whether that's hormones, whether that's abortion, right? Like all of these people get mad just when they see someone with colored hair. Like they don't like someone's ability to have bodily autonomy. That's one of their core politics. And you see this a lot, especially when it comes to like trans men, because there's this notion that their bodies exist in service of cis straight men, right? And anything that gets in the way of that is an attack on cis men in general and all of patriarchal society. It's like very, very, very much like regular misogyny, but with an added bonus of transphobia. conservative activist Christopher Rufo made a tweet a few days ago with a picture of Elliot Page pre-transition with a caption that says, "This is what they took from you," right? It's like this notion that their bodies belong to you, a cis man, and by them choosing to change their bodies as they see fit, that's an attack on their body's access to you. It redoes a whole bunch of misogyny. It does a whole bunch of really bad transphobia. It's a really gross package, but it hits on a lot of points of like this type of patriarchal conservative brain. And I think this even carries out into like hatred of trans women, as trans women are seen as predators, so they hate trans women to protect cis women, right? Like you see, it's all of this like possession, right? It's this possession of the body of a female, so you need to protect it against the creepy trans women, right? It's like it's all of this idea of like owning women's bodies is central to a lot of these ideas of transphobia. So we're gonna see a lot more stuff about how it's going to change from no hormones, no transition until you're 18 to no hormones, no transition until you're 25 to no hormones and no transition at all. This past year, we've seen many proposed felony healthcare bans for trans youth. Said bills have passed in multiple states like Alabama, which means that it's going to forcibly detransition teens across the state. In Missouri, there's a similar bill in the works titled the Save Adolescents from Experimentation Act, which currently applies to individuals younger than 18, but Missouri physicians and healthcare providers under the bill would be prevented from recommending gender-affirming care to patients who are under 18, and there has already been discussion in legislative sessions to extend the bill past the age of 18. While debating the bill seeking to restrict access to gender-affirming care, some lawmakers suggested that the medical interventions like hormones be withheld from transgender and non-binary individuals until they're 25 years old. And during a public hearing for the House Bill 2649, a psychologist, Lori Hayes, testified that she believes young adults under the age of 25 are unable to fully comprehend the dramatic and drastic and irreparable, quote-unquote, changes to their bodies that they will undergo if they receive gender-affirming medical treatments like puberty blockers and hormone therapies. Also, while testifying, Hayes, the psychologist, said that she supported conversion therapy. So that's surprising to nobody. Or it shouldn't be.
It also takes those people to the point where they're not necessarily eligible for their parents' healthcare, right? So, like, I think 26 is the time when you're too old, you age out. Yeah, so it's again, like, it's a backdoor, like, prohibition on transitioning for a lot of people.
Yeah, yes, it's just trying to stop it at all. You can't take their word for it. They just don't want you around. That's it. They want you to kill yourself. They want you just to go away or not be trans. Like that's what they want. It's obviously I'm gonna do a few Journal of American Medical Association found that gender-affirming healthcare, including puberty blockers and hormones between the ages of 13 and 20, was associated with 60% lower odds of moderate or severe depression and 73% lower odds of suicidality. Another study published last year by the Trevor Project found that among transgender non-binary minors, hormone therapy associated with nearly 40% lower odds of recent depression and suicide attempts. So they just want to ban the things that make you more likely to live, right? They just don't want you around. That's the actual message. So back to just kind of speaking of just not wanting you around. We're going to do some updates on Protect Texas Kids, the extremely transphobic, openly Christian fascist, their words not mine, group based in Texas who organized a lot of events to harass either drag shows or harass pride events last month. Its leader, Kelly Niedert, that's how I'm going to say it, tweeted a few weeks ago, quote, "Let's start rounding up people who participate in pride events." I wonder what she means by that. I wonder what that means. Surely doesn't mean she just wants to kill all gay people. Oh, it does? Okay. Another tweet from the main Protect Texas Kids account was, "Today's protest went well. No children seemed to be in the drag show, but there were a bunch of adults wearing mouse ears and watching the men dressed up as Disney princesses dance around. Totally normal and not weird, right?" So it's obviously not about protecting kids, right? Like that's not the focus. That's not the focus of their tweet. That's not the focus of what they want, right? Protecting kids, quote unquote, is a cheap excuse just to want to hate gay people and want gay people to go away. That's all it is. We're kind of retreading the same ground here, but man, it is still frustrating how many people like fall for the bit. It's not about protecting kids. It's not about saving kids from groomers. You can look at all of the sexual abuse in evangelical churches, Catholic churches, it's Christian summer camps, whatever. It's not about protecting kids. They don't give a single fuck. It's about wanting gay people to go away. Now, both Kelly Niedert's and Protect Texas Kids accounts, which they used to organize their Christian fascist events, both of those got banned in mid-June. Kelly's got banned for saying, "Let's start rounding up people who participate in pride events." But this extends beyond Texas. This extends beyond Twitter.com, right? Obviously, these people were just using Twitter to organize, so it already extended out into the real world. But it's not just Texas either. See, I think it's congressional candidate Mark Burns, who's a pro-Trump pastor, was running for South Carolina House District. He called for the execution of LGBTQ and trans people by using grooming rhetoric. And then he laid out exactly how executions could legally be done. So this type of like state-enforced genocide. Let's play this. Let's play a clip.
The LGBT, transgender, grooming our children's minds is a national security threat because it is ultimately designed to destabilize the republic we call the United States of America. That's why when I'm elected, I don't want to just vote. I want to start holding people accountable for treason to the Constitution. I am going to push to reenact HUAC. HUAC is the House of Un-American Activities Committee. It was a real committee that was formulated back in the 50s, and it's a committee that we should reenact that starts holding these people accountable for treason. We need to hold people for treason, start having some public hearings, and start executing people who are found guilty for their treasonous acts against the Constitution of the United States of America, just like they did back in 1776.
You know what, South Carolina? This is our guy.
No.
So
that was an amazing, the way he misspoke and called it the House of Un-American Activities. It just sounds like a fun place.
So that's not ideal, is it? That kind of sucks.
That seems bad.
Yeah, that was really out there. He's genocide advocating.
They're trying to mainstream the political ability to advocate genocide, right? And some of them it's not fully catching on yet, right? We're on the on-ramp to this. The South Carolina pastor was defeated by the incumbent Representative William Timmons in the GOP primary for the state's 4th congressional district, but Pastor Mark Burns still received 24% of the vote. So that's still a lot of people. That's still a lot of people voting for that, and that number, I don't think is going to shrink.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that like everyone loses, and like it is so unbelievably hard to beat an incumbent in primary. Like even if he was just a normal guy with like regular politics, he would have lost that election. So
still,
so it's not actually a referendum on his popularity, like the popularity of what he's saying. It's
24% of the vote.
Yeah, it's worth noting that like even here in Southern California, right, where it's supposedly like very liberal, we had a candidate for sheriff's office who was a deputy city attorney and was endorsed by the Union Tribune, just openly spewing like transphobic groomer stuff at public meetings and getting endorsed by the local newspaper. They rescinded their endorsement later, but this isn't just like a red state thing if people think that is that.
No, I would say that'd be a lot more common than people who run for sheriff, who generally tend to be more conservative because they're running for sheriff.
True.
All right. Well, let's have an ad break, and then we'll come back to talk about Roe v. Wade and the attack on future rights, including the ability to have same-sex relationships. Oh wow, what a fun time we have today. All right, we are back. So, after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last month, there was an immediate push for anti-gay and anti-trans legal challenges using the same legal logic against the right to privacy based off of the traditions deeply rooted in our nation's history, quote unquote. So this was like undoubtedly gonna happen, right? We've been proposing that this was a possibility for a while, but it was definitely made worse by Justice Clarence Thomas, friend of the pod, who argued in a concurring opinion that the Supreme Court should, quote, reconsider its past rulings codifying rights such as the right to use contraception, the right to have a same-sex relationship and same-sex marriage, invoking Griswold, Lawrence, and Oberfeld. 3 cases having to do with Americans' fundamental right to privacy, due process, and equal protection. Thomas wrote, quote, we have a duty to correct the error regarding these established in those precedents. Which, pretty grim framing there, because that's a bad sign. And we are already seeing stuff like this in effect, actually. We don't need to wait for the Supreme Court to make rulings. States are already starting to do this exact thing. In an ongoing Alabama lawsuit that cites Dobbs overturning Roe v. Wade about medically detransitioning all trans teenagers, there is this deeply threatening turn of phrase, quote, no one, adult or child, has the right to transitioning treatments not deeply rooted in our nation's history and tradition. Interesting how they put adult or child there. Isn't that intriguing?
Yeah, and it's also fun how the deeply rooted in our nation's history thing is now just sort of like, here is the word that you say to let you do fascism. And it's like, oh, hey, do you know what is deeply rooted in our nation's tradition and history? Shooting congressmen. This is a thing that has been done many times. Like, I mean, again, like this. It's like this is the whole, like, this whole thing. It's just like it's so the whole thing is it's so incredibly sort of nakedly transparent and cynical. And like this is, it's the standard fascist thing, right? We're going to create some sort of mythical past, and then we're going to like resurrect whatever fucking things existed back then. It's like, oh, hey, what actually existed back then?
Yeah.
I don't know. People tried to kill the government all the time. Like,
they're really playing from like the lowercase t traditionalist framework here. They're doing all the bits we thought they would do. It's not great. Late last month, during the end of Pride, Texas Republican Party unveiled its updated official position on LGBTQ issues, defining homosexuality as, quote, an abnormal lifestyle choice, unquote, and also opposing, quote, all efforts to validate transgender identity. The party's new official stance on LGBTQ issues was unveiled during Pride Month, and as advocates fight against a record number of anti-LGBTQ bills introduced in states across the country this year, more than 340 bills, according to the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest LGBTQ advocacy group on the legal front. Thousands of Republican activists met at the party's biennial convention in Houston in mid-June to agree to the party's platform on a range of issues, including the rejection of the 2020 election results and a call to repeal the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
No.
Which was enacted to prevent discrimination against black voters. I would say this is a mask-off moment, but they've never had the mask on in the first place.
People have, like, that's like that specific one. That is a thing. Like half of the Republican Party's platform has been people suing about the Voting Rights Act.
Exactly.
50 years.
It's not actually mask-off. It's just that they're doing it louder than they were doing it before.
Yeah.
The section titled "Homosexuality and Gender Issues" had the party stating that LGBTQ people should have no legal protection from discrimination, and in fact suggested intent to ensure people's ability to do hate speech and hate crimes. Part of the 40-page resolution reads, quote, homosexuality is an abnormal lifestyle choice. We believe there should be no granting of special legal entitlements or creation of special status for homosexual behavior, regardless of state of origin. And we oppose any criminal or civil penalties against those who oppose homosexuality out of faith, conviction, or belief in traditional values.
Ouch.
I just want to put it on the record here that like a number of my friends who have been attacked like in the last 3 months it's a lot. And
I got called
Yeah.
I got called a faggot for the first time in the streets of Portland a few months ago.
Yeah, it's great.
It's
fun.
accelerating. It's going. But yeah, I mean, specifically, I think a lot of the last part of that resolution there about, you know, opposing any civil penalties against those who oppose homosexuality out of faith. I think that's probably definitely referencing Steadfast Baptist Church, the church that that openly advocates the genocide of queer people, which we've talked about in our last City of Hate episode.
Yeah, I think they're also trying to go back to like the whole like cake bullshit thing.
Oh yeah, obviously,
and like stuff like that. It's like
honestly, we are so past the cake problem now, because now they just want to
now they just want to
murder.
Kill everyone.
They just want to do like
give you a poison
mass.
cake now.
They just want to do mass genocide. Like, I'm so over cakes. Like, and in the trend of increasing the age barrier of gender-affirming healthcare into adulthood, the Texas Republicans called for the ban of gender-affirming healthcare, including the distribution of puberty blockers or hormone-suppressing therapies, and the performance of gender-affirming surgeries to anyone under the age of 21. So that is the new Texas Republican official position: is that these things should be banned for under the age of 21. And that's not a hard cap. They're going to keep raising that cap as often as they can. And as proof, I will offer up the past 35 minutes of episode. Like, everything we've said in the past 35 minutes is supporting the opinion that cap, they want it to go up.
Yeah. I'm sure they also simultaneously advocate for like heterosexual relationship age of consent to just drop.
Oh yeah, like 12 years old.
Yeah.
Speaking of Texas, near the end of June, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who sent his office home in the celebration of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, said that he will defend Texas's anti-sodomy law if the Supreme Court revisits Lawrence v. Texas. I'm going to play an extremely frustrating clip here. Here's a fun time.
I'm sure you read Justice Thomas's concurrence where he said that there were a number of other of these issues, Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell, that he felt needs to be looked at again. Obviously, the Lawrence case came from Texas. That was what outlawed sodomy. Would you, as Attorney General, be comfortable defending a law that once again outlawed sodomy, that questioned Lawrence again, or Griswold, or gay marriage, that came from the state legislature to put to the test what Justice Thomas said?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of issues here, but certainly the Supreme Court has stepped into issues that I don't think there was any constitutional provision dealing with. They were legislative issues, and this is one of those issues, and there may be more. So it would depend on the issue and depend on what state law it says at the time and what was overruled.
Just for the sake of time here, you wouldn't rule out that if the state legislature passed the exact same law that Lawrence overturned on sodomy, you wouldn't have any problem then defending that and taking that case back to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, look, my job is to defend state law, and I'll continue to do that. That is my job under the Constitution, and I'm certainly willing and able to do that.
So, first of all, in this clip of Ken Paxton, he looks like a zombie. I don't know what's going on with his face, but his eye keeps twitching in a way that looks really uncanny. He looks like look at this man's face. Look at what is going on.
That's an unfortunate pause.
No, he looks like that in motion too. It's not an unfortunate pause. He just looks. There is something going wrong with Ken Paxton. We need to get to the bottom of this. But also all of that stuff about enforcing laws against sodomy, making gay sex illegal. They don't want gay people to fuck, is what they're actually saying. And if you do, they want to send you to jail. So that's something that Ken Paxton wants to do. Wrapped in very flowery language about defending the laws on record, that laws that you are enforcing, therefore you're making the laws in effect. So one aspect of this that I want to touch on again before we close out. In our City of Hate episodes about the Christian fascists in Dallas attacking drag shows and Steadfast Baptist Church, and even in some of the stuff that we've gone over in this episode, right? There's a lot of talk about like government-approved extermination, whether that be like for treason, for un-American acts, executions based off biblical law, rounding up people for degenerate or deviant behavior, arresting doctors for performing gender-affirming surgeries. There's a lot of like talk around like the government's ability to legally genocide people. But the other aspect of this is like the vigilante justice angle of people wanting to just do physical violence themselves. And there's a way that these two things can intersect in a really interesting way. I'm going to play one last clip here.
You know, some teachers pushing sex values on your third grader. Why don't you go in there and thrash the teacher? You talk to a normal person's kids about sex in kindergarten, you get beaten up. You should be beaten up. Please.
If I was a parent and my 5th grade daughter had to sleep and shower in some kind of cabin at some summer camp that I paid money to send my child to, and there was a man calling himself a woman sleeping in her cabin, my husband would have beat him into the ground.
Where are the men actually standing up against these men who think they are women that are trying to compete in these female sports? Shouldn't put up with it anymore.
You need to intervene. You need to show up to the sporting event. Like, this is not happening, actually.
There is almost nothing that can be done that is over the line to stop this.
It's disgusting. There was a time in this country of just a little more decency where if someone even voiced the idea of taking your kid to a drag show, they'd be arrested.
They are underqualified to have children. They should have their children taken away from them because it's child abuse.
So that's a lot of stuff, but it fluctuates between talking about people taking this into their own hands in a very like obviously like misogynistic and transphobic way. Again, it's about like the access to, protecting access to the feminine body. And then a lot of other stuff around, the government arresting people and such, right? It's about, it's a mix between like doing stuff yourself, in a form of like vigilantism, or, eventually advocating for the government's ability to do this. Now, we've covered a number of incidents of like violence or of things that were escalating to the point of that right before it stopped across the Dallas area. We talked about stuff in Boise, Idaho with Patriot Front. We talked about the Proud Boys who stormed the library outside of San Francisco. I think those are in our. I think I talked about most of those across a few of the City of Hate episodes. Then we have there is other incidents outside of just those cities. In Atlanta, a youth justice group was forced to cancel their rally in support of trans rights after an organizer received a specific, quote, vulgar death threat. In Kalama, Washington, a school was put on lockdown after an anti-trans student threatened a mass shooting following a broad student walkout in support of a trans classmate who had been assaulted. People graffitied "Pervs Work Here" on an elementary school in Ventura County, California, following a local right-wing paper's story about a third-grade teacher who affirmed a trans student's name and pronouns. In the lead-up to Pride Month, an anti-LGBTQ activist named Ethan Schmidt Crockett vowed to hunt gay people and trans people and their allies at Target stores. Following the store's decision to celebrate Pride, he made the same threat a month before. In June, he attended the counter-protest of a pro-gun control March for Our Lives demonstration carrying an AR-15. In Kiel, Wisconsin, schools were forced to shut down and go virtual after bomb threats were made in response to the district's investigation of anti-trans harassment by 3 students. Something I've been thinking about a lot the past few weeks is that even before Roe v. Wade was overturned, multiple states enacted laws for like vigilante bounty hunters to do the work of the state that the state wasn't legally allowed to do yet, like directly, right? And they were getting just regular people to combat and intimidate providers into not doing abortion procedures. And we're already seeing an increase in physical attacks targeting queer people. And I think many more regular people are waiting for the state government's permission to do the same thing. we don't need to wait for the Supreme Court to say gay sex can be made illegal, right? States can already start doing this stuff now, and there's already people waiting in the wings, and as soon as they get the go-ahead, they will jump at this opportunity. I'm going to play one final clip that is pretty grim.
I just had a man tell me in public that he can't wait until he's legally able to hunt me down. I just had a man in public. He can't wait until he can legally hunt us down. This is not okay. This is not okay.
So that was a queer person who lives in Oklahoma, talking about something that happened to them last month. And I try to, when I make these episodes, I try to not just lay out a whole bunch of bad things. Be like, here's a problem. All right, bye everybody. Like, because that sucks. But also, I don't know what the solution here is, because this sucks. The California House and Senate just passed Bill SB 107. This bill would provide many protections for families fleeing states like Texas and Alabama. It would protect them from extradition, from out-of-state investigations, and from out-of-state custody judgments based on providing gender-affirming health care. The bill is currently in review by the California Committee on Appropriations, and then it would need to be signed by the governor. If your state doesn't have a trans sanctuary law on the docket, maybe it's time to ask your representative about that. Preferably maybe when they're like out at dinner or at church. But also like even getting to the point where we're making plans to flee to other states, when trans people are forced to make plans to flee out of country, when you're investigating what kind of citizenship you can get based on your ancestral family history. Once we're at that point, it's really hard. Like and in discussions with queer friends the past few weeks, we've been having more and more conversations about that. More and more plans about when things really do fully break down, where do we go? What do we do? Like, and it sucks because there's so many people who live in states like Oklahoma, like Texas, right? Where that's people's homes. That's where these queer people are living, and they shouldn't be forced to leave. Like that shouldn't happen. And we have great folks like the Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club, which I think are providing a really good example of how queer people can work together to start doing community defense in your own areas. To say, no, this is our home too, and we're going to fucking walk around with rifles to defend it if we have to. Obviously not everyone mentally is able to do that, right? But there's other ways to get more connected to your local community to strengthen like queer areas inside, states where these things are happening. The other thing I see a lot with queer people that makes me really sad is that fighting the state, right? Fighting these types of big homophobic institutions who want to kill us, that's hard and scary. We feel so powerless. We want to feel like we have any agency. We want to feel like we have any power at all because there's so many people with power who are hurting us. And it's hard to actually fight back against those. But we feel powerless, so we want to feel like we're able. So instead, we turn on other people who are within our own communities. Because it's easier to attack people who are like us. It's easier to do that, right? It still gives you a sense of having agency, but they're trying to murder us all. Like personal disagreements on politics or whatever aside, it would be really nice if we stop just doing nonsense, fighting with each other, and doing dumb click drama, dumb discourse. They're trying to kill us. Can we not do that? I know you want to find some way to push back on something so you feel like you have an ability to do anything. And doing it against the police, doing it against your state government, doing it against the Supreme Court, that's much harder, right? It's easier to do it against, a friend of yours or someone who you used to be friends with. That's so much easier. But that's not helping in their attempts to just do genocide. So I think making plans to get out of where you are if you have to, making plans is necessary sometimes. I've thought of this. I've been even me in the Pacific Northwest have had many thoughts about that. It's also very important to start strengthening your relationships with other queer people in your communities and starting to put together ways to work with them to make a show of force and say, hey, we're here. We're here to stay right now. You can't scare us out right now. Because there needs to be some way to combat it. Because these people, they're trying to be regressive, right? Like we are already at a point that we progressed far enough that they are scared of how much progress has happened, so they're trying to turn the clock back. Our challenge is to keep the change coming and push back against these people who are trying to hold on to the dead 20th century, right? The fear of change and the fear of the future is driving their return to the past. We don't need to just run away, because we should be winning this fight in some ways, because we already hold the ground that they want to take away from us. So yeah, bad stuff is coming, but just because bad things happened in history doesn't mean they need to happen again. Like there is ways to intervene to stop this. Should you keep your passports renewed? Yes, you obviously should. But we don't just need to run away, because we actually have ground to stand on here. So
yeah, and I think one thing that's also important to remember is that the people who got us here were facing way, way worse odds than we are. Like,
yeah,
the people who had to do this. Yeah, and so like the job that we have is incredibly intimidating. It is also easier than the stuff that has already been done.
Right.
And
we already got to this point facing extremely harsh conditions, and we already got there. I don't know. It's always struggling to try to find ways to think about this that gives you a little bit of like, it's just like, it's so easy to be a doomer. It's so easy just to say we're all fucked. We all need to move away. That's the simple solution. But the most simple things are also usually incomplete and wrong. So just trying to find other ways to think about this problem. Because we don't need to tell queer people to run away. And you don't need to tell them they have to fight either. Queer people can make their own decisions and offer their own resources and start operating in a network that helps the survival of all of us in increasingly challenging times.
And I should also say, like, non-queer people, like, look, the defining characteristic of this moment is that there is a silent majority that supports queer rights.
Yeah.
And if the only way that we actually lose this is if that majority does nothing. But if that majority moves, if the cis people who actually believe in this stuff, and if the non-queer people who actually believe that we should have rights and we should be able to live our lives do stuff, we will fucking crush these people. They will be remembered as a fucking grain of dust in the sand that was crushed by the tide of history. And we can do that. We can destroy them. We can make this moment in history a incredibly brief blip where people are like, oh, hey, wasn't it weird when homophobia came back for like 3 years and then it was just gone again? That is in our power. We just have to do it.
Yep. All right. Well, strengthen community relations. Stop doing nonsense infighting for no good reason because you want to feel powerful. Put that effort into actually fighting the people that are trying to hurt you, or put that effort into making friends.
Yeah.
That does it for us today. That was my episode on the increase in queer exterminationism. Yeah, see you on the other side.
Hi, this is Jo Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And I just sat down with a Minnie Driver.
The Irish traveller said when I was 16, you're going to have a terrible time with men.
Actor, storyteller, and unapologetic Aquarian visionary. Aquarius is all about freedom-loving and different perspectives, and I find a lot of people with strong placements in Aquarius are misunderstood. A Sun and Venus in Aquarius in her 7th house spark her unconventional approach to partnership.
He really has taught me to embrace people sleeping in different rooms, on different houses, in different places, but just an embracing of the isness of it all.
If you're navigating your own transformation or just want a chart-side view into how a leading artist integrates astrology, creativity, and real life, this episode is a must listen. Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
China's Ministry of State Security is one of the most mysterious and powerful spy agencies in the world. But in 2017, the FBI got inside.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
This MSS officer has no idea the U.S. government is onto him. But the FBI has his chats, texts, emails, even his personal diary. Hear how they got it on the 6th Bureau podcast.
I now have several terabytes of an MSS officer, no doubt, no question, of his life. And that's a unicorn.
No one had ever seen anything like that. It was unbelievable.
This is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the 6th Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
In 2023, a story gripped the UK, evoking horror and disbelief.
The nurse who should have been in charge of caring for tiny babies is now the most prolific child killer in modern British history.
Everyone thought they knew how it ended. A verdict, a villain, a nurse named Lucy Letby.
Lucy Letby has been found guilty.
But what if we didn't get the whole story?
The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we follow the evidence and hear from the people that lived it to ask what really happened when the world decided who Lucy Letby was.
No voicing of any skepticism or doubt.
It'll cause so much harm at every single level of the British establishment of this is wrong.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Eckerd, and in 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to plan. He became the first Bachelor to ever have his final rose rejected. The internet turned on him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
But what happened to Clayton after the show made even bigger headlines. It began as a one-night stand and ended in a courtroom, with Clayton at the center of a very strange paternity scandal.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
Police search warrant.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. This is Love Trapped. This season, an epic battle of he said, she said, and the search for accountability in a sea of lies.
I have done nothing except get pregnant by the Bachelor!
Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to It Could Happen Here, a podcast about things that could happen or in today's case are about to happen. I want to talk to you today about the Friendship Park, which exists between San Diego and Tijuana. If you haven't spent time at the border, it's difficult to understand how, despite getting bigger and uglier every year, it feels at once omnipresent and non-existent. Friendship Park was always one of the places where the border loomed, but it never quite managed to beat out the tremendous feelings of goodwill you could experience there on a Saturday morning, on a piece of sand next to a steel fence that demarcates the end of the United States. Borders exist to control us, not to protect us. And this is never more apparent than it was at Friendship Park, where you could watch grandparents meeting grandkids and dreamers checking in with their parents. At Friendship Park, a half-century-old institution that allowed families divided by the border to meet across the French, The border certainly didn't make anyone feel safer. But over time, people who had never set foot on the 2 miles of sand in Imperial Beach that many families walked across weekly to be together made laws that would make it even harder for those families to be together. For decades, the park was the only place these mixed immigration status families could come together. People flew from across the US to meet relatives who were trying to make the crossing north to join their friends and loved ones. It was an emotional place, but most of the time it was a happy place. You could see kids having parties on the Mexican side, and sometimes concerts would take place, with the band split between 2 countries but playing one tune. On the Tijuana side, the fence is covered in murals. At moments, it felt like a small victory over the pointless cruelty that happens here on a daily basis. The park itself was opened by Pat Nixon in 1951. At the time, she said, "I hope there won't be a fence here too long." But since then, the US government has built a secure fence in the 1990s under Bill Clinton. Then a supposedly more secure fence following 9/11. Then it built a secondary wall in 2009. In 2012, a gate was installed to allow people to enter at certain times on weekends and meet their families separated by just one barrier. Now, there are plans to replace that secondary wall by building a 30-foot wall under the pretense that the current structure is unsound. This new wall, made to the Trump design but built under Biden's instruction, will not have a gate, and the last place in the country that families could touch and heal will be gone forever. Customs and Border Protection blocked access to Friendship Park in February 2020. Heavy rains that year forced state officials to temporarily close Border Field State Park, the larger park in which Friendship Park is nestled. Since then, Border Patrol has not opened the gate that lets people unite briefly with their families. They claim an influx of migrants has prevented them from having the staffing required to open the park. But on weekends, agents are posted up right by where the park gate is anyway, in case people try and make the crossing without permission, in order to see the families that many of them have been separated from for over 2 years. Throughout those 2 years, I've crossed to Tijuana to report on the growing number of people come from around the world, from Haiti, from Central and South America and Ethiopia, and recently Ukraine, to name but a few countries. Despite their heartbreaking stories of danger, fear, and loss, and separation from the people they love, they haven't been able to file asylum claims due to the Trump administration's spurious use of public health laws to severely and illegally limit asylum. I don't have time here to explain the entirety of the Migrant Protection Protocol in Title 42, and I don't really want to either, because the justification behind them isn't what's important. The cruelty they manifest is what's important. Joe Biden, who came to office promising a kinder approach, has defended some of these policies in court with his Department of Justice, and the particular cruelty of Title 42, which allowed authorities to expel migrants who arrived at US land borders, has persisted despite Biden's recent change of heart, because several states managed to sue successfully to keep it in place. In the midst of all this, more and more people have been separated by the border. Now, the Biden administration is looking to permanently close the one little island of hope that remained on a beach at the end of America. Obviously, a park with a massive fence doesn't solve a broken system, or make the cruelty any less cruel. But it was a place for healing, and kindness, and love and families. And now that place too is under threat. I caught up with Robert Vivar, a friend of Friendship Park, to talk about the park, the threats to it, and what you can do to help. Robert, would you like to start off just by introducing yourself and explaining sort of where you fit in this, in the Friendship Park world and in the world of the border more generally?
Absolutely, James. My name is Robert Vivar, and I'm part of the Friends of Friendship Park core leadership group. And the reason I'm so involved with Friendship Park and why Friendship Park is so important to me is because I was actually one of those family members that at one point in my life I was deported. And the only way that I was able to see some of my family was through the border wall there at Friendship Park. In particular, my son, who is active duty military, and because of his military status, was not able to come across the border, or it was very difficult for him to secure authorization from his command to be able to cross the border. And therefore, the only type of visit that I could have with my son and my granddaughters was through that border wall. So firsthand, I understood very well the importance of allowing on the weekends, at least for a few hours on the weekend, that opportunity for families to be able to meet there at Friendship Park.
Yeah. So perhaps we should explain for people who aren't here in San Diego what what Friendship Park is, right? Or perhaps what it was in, say, 2019 before it was shut.
Absolutely. Back prior to COVID, Friendship Park is a binational park separated by a border wall, actually by two border walls, on the southwestern tip of the United States, bordering Mexico. It's a border between Imperial Beach and Tijuana Beach. And Friendship Park is actually a strip of land inside Porterfield State Park. And that strip of land is in between two border walls, border fences, if you may say so. And that part is considered to us Friendship Park, which is the area where persons, families, mixed status families from both sides of the border would meet. But it wasn't only a place for families to meet. There's also a place for people of good nature of the United States and Mexico to be able to meet and also extend their friendship between the two countries and the two communities. Back almost 51 years ago, this is the area that then First Lady Pat Nixon actually inaugurated as International Friendship Park, and actually went as far as cutting a barbed wire, or having the Secret Service cut the barbed wire there at the park, so she could reach across to the Mexico side and hug the people of Mexico because of the sentiment, the feeling of that friendship between the two countries, and her very famous words that she wished that there would no longer be a fence here to separate these two great countries. And of course, we know that 51 years later, or almost 51 years later, that has taken an opposite course of direction, where we now have two border walls. Plans are to erect two even higher, uglier hate walls to divide our two great countries.
Yeah. So perhaps, again, I think people have a very... the way that people see the border when they don't live on the border is very different to the way we see the border when we live on the border, right? And I think part of that is in this understanding of walls and fences and barriers and the various things which we have already along the border, right? So maybe you could give us a little sort of potted history of the different... I think you're right. There's secure fences, right, that were built through the Friendship Park and across the sort of San Diego, Tijuana area.
Right. Well, again, for the longest time, the only fence that used to separate the two countries was that strand of barbed wire. However, after Operation Gatekeeper 9/11, it was decided to build a sturdier fence. And then in 2011, a secondary fence was erected. And at that time, the threat of the park being closed again, because of the advocacy of Friends of Friendship Park, it was negotiated with Border Patrol that the park would continue to remain open with a limited access of, at that time, 25 persons at a time. on Saturdays and Sundays from 10 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That second wall was erected when the federal government claimed eminent domain from the state of California and acquired that piece of land, which is now considered the enforcement area, and to us is the area that we better known as Friendship Park.
Right. And so there's a threat to the park now, right? There's a new threat. And I think people, again, might not have realized that we're continuing to build border wall, border barrier, border dike, it's sometimes called, depending on which part of the country you're in. But can you explain how, despite Joe Biden having signed this executive order saying, what he claims saying not one more mile of wall, how are we still having this threat of building a bigger, uglier wall?
Right. And I think that's precisely the question that Friends of Friendship Park are asking, that why is it that if President Biden has stated that he would not build one more inch of Trump's border wall, all of a sudden now has decided to finish the construction of Trump's border wall? It's a question that we all ask, and is part of the petition that we have reached out to Border Patrol as to the inclusion of the public and in those plans on continuing the replacement of that wall with 30-foot bollard fencing.
Yeah, and that 30-foot bollard fencing, that's what people will be familiar with as the Trump wall, right?
That is correct. Something that, the fencing that exists right now, it's there, and I guess even though we may not like what it is and what it represents, but it is there. But now to go even further and further desecrate our park with two 30-foot bollard-style fences just completely obstructs the aesthetics of the park. Desecrates our park.
Yeah. With this sort of further threat to the park looming, you touched on it earlier, but I'd like to go back to what the park means, especially to families who are separated by the border, right, and can't cross to see each other.
Oh, absolutely. On when the park was open on a weekend basis, we would have families, for example, grandmothers that had never met their grandchildren, meet their grandchildren for the first time right across that border wall. Mothers that hadn't seen their kids in 20, 25, 30 years. The joy of being able to at least see them across that border wall and just, a couple inches away from them. And even though, nothing could pass through that barrier, the only thing that was able to pass through the orifice there on the wall or the fencing was the tip of your finger, which is why we kind of created what we call the pinky kiss, because that's the only thing that would reach across, and that's the only way we would be able to hug and kiss our loved ones on the other side of the border. Very significant, and something that that we hope more people would understand is that by having the park open and families allowed to be able to visit across that fence, it would allow people, even though it's not the best scenario, but at least it would give families the opportunity to remain being a family, to have a little bit of contact with their loved ones, something very important. We keep hearing about reasons for, border walls and more tech and security and so forth, is because incursions. Well, to us, this is one of the reasons why we have more incursions because people get desperate from losing contact with their loved ones, that they're willing to risk their own life to be able to reach their loved ones. That's why you have increase in people trying to swim across the border wall. That's why you have people reaching out to further points in the desert trying to reach their loved ones. That's why you have people climbing some of these 30-foot walls and falling and bravely injuring themselves, because you get to the point that your family is everything in your life and you're willing to risk your life to reach that family. When when Friendship Park was open, we had a lot of conversations with a lot of people that came to the park to visit their families. And in speaking to them, they would tell you that, being able to see their families, their loved ones, and sharing those moments together was very comforting and very energizing and motivating to continue to fight, to search for a legal opportunity to be able to reunite with their loved ones.
Yeah, and I think we should point out that since 2020, since the park has been closed, it's not just the park being closed, which has created a hostile environment for people seeking asylum or seeking to reunite with their families in the United States, right? We've had the Migrant Protection Protocol, which is better known as Remain in Mexico, right? And we've had Title 42, sometimes called Catch and Release, both of which do the same things that you said, which is for increase the amount of people who cross in high-risk areas and increase the danger to migrants, chiefly. So there's this perception, I think, that things changed in January 2021, but they didn't, I think, for most people, certainly people I've met trying to come to the United States to be safe. They still can't, and as you say, they still can't see their families. Perhaps we should also mention that sometimes we talk about Friendship Park being binational, but it's more than that, right? It's not just people from Mexico who come to meet their families at Friendship Park. There's people from all around the world who are unable to come to the United States but are in Tijuana, right?
Right, absolutely. And it's not just families that gather there. It's friendships. It's an opportunity for people from any part of the world to be able to make a connection, make a friend right across that border wall without actually having to cross the border. If for whatever reason it may be, they cannot come across to the Mexico side. The park is all about friendship. That's why to First Lady Pat Nixon was so important, the designation of the park, in consideration of the great friendship that existed and has always existed. And you know what? No matter what happens, that is going to continue because, in particular, San Diego and Tijuana, we're really one community. There's a tremendous population in San Diego that have relatives in Tijuana and vice versa. And it's not only, the family, but commerce. We're one community. And one way or another, people are going to stay connected, always figure out different ways to be able to remain connected and have that friendship. And I think part of the reason for that is because, a lot of people see that border fence and they see a barrier, but we see that much more than that barrier is the barrier in our heart. And with, the people of our community, that barrier doesn't exist. The only barrier to us is that fence. The barrier in our heart does not exist because we have respect for each other and we consider ourselves friends in one community on both sides of that border wall.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the border exists a lot more sort of on the ground than it does in the community here. And I think so many thousands of people cross every day. It's really odd to have it presented as this hard, impenetrable thing, and then it's also just an annoyance and a reason that we sit in our cars for hours trying to cross north. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about, because there's the Friendship Park and then there's the southern side, right? Parque de la Amistad.
Correct.
What's the official sort of setup in Mexico with regards to the park? It's a little different from the US, right?
The big difference on the Mexico side is like our pastor John Fanister says, on the Mexico side is one big party, one big friendly, happy atmosphere, just like what you would expect to find in any park where families gather on the weekend, and now during summer vacation, even during the week. A bustling beach city with a magnificent, friendly park, family-oriented, family-friendly park where people go to enjoy a beautiful park. Unfortunately, our friends on the U.S. side cannot enjoy the park as much as our friends on the Mexico side do because of these limitations on the park.
Yeah, it's a shame. Like you said, it's very contrasting. Like the US side is kind of difficult to get to, and it's only open certain hours. Or it's not open at all post. We should explain that, right? So it was closed in 2020 for COVID, and then, if I understand right, following that, it remained closed because Border Patrol were understaffed, they claim.
Right. That is what we have been told at Friends of Friendship Park. Originally, that it was closed because of COVID. And the understanding was that when the COVID situation was over, then that their plan was to reopen Friendship Park. However, now we're being told that because of a lack of personnel, that they're not able to staff it accordingly to be able to open it. You touched a little bit earlier on the MPP program. If there has been increase in incursions into the U.S., a lot of it has to do with the asylum process that has been halted for the last couple of years. That forces people in desperation to take their life at risk and try to gain entry into the U.S. It's not that difficult to understand. If you're living in a country where crime and violence is widespread, and you have a choice whether you leave your country and travel 3,000-4,000 miles to reach some kind of safety, to protect the life of your loved ones, of your family, if you risk that, you're gonna risk your life trying to get across it and protect your family. And if the only way you can do it is by jumping over that fence or swimming around that ocean, that's what we've seen happening. And a lot of that has got to do with the asylum process that is been shut down and continues to be shut down. People are gonna continue to try to save their life and their life of their family. That's why we're hoping that the asylum process can be reinstated as international law requires, calls for it, and that would definitely show a decrease in incursions. Again, a lot of these incursions are people trying to reach safety for themselves and their loved ones.
Yeah, and it's been a very difficult situation in Tijuana for a lot of people. A lot of people who have arrived since MPP started. Like for a while, people were camping at the border crossing, right? But in town, like at Head West.
Yeah, that
then
is
they
correct.
got cleared. Yeah, it's also sort of forcing all these shelters and nonprofits in Tijuana to saddle the burden, which that they do a very good job with largely, but this, we're this massive, richest country on earth, and we're just sort of shutting the door at the minute and saying, like, you're not welcome.
Right. That is absolutely correct.
So I know that you've been doing some events at the Friendship Park, right? You've got a concert coming up. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, absolutely. We have a concert coming up for our 51st anniversary. And the headliner for the concert is a gentleman known as the father of Mexican rock and roll, which began here. I'm saying here, which began in Tijuana, Mexico, Javier Batiz. And what is really neat is that Javier Batiz was actually the mentor of Carlos Santana. And, we all love the music of Carlos Santana, incredible performer. Well, he had his start with Javier Batiz at one point here in Tijuana, Mexico. I keep saying here, I'm in San Diego, in Tijuana, Mexico. And, Javier is an icon of rock and roll music and of Tijuana. And, what I think is really special about this concert is speaking to Javier. His ideals are very much along the ideals of what Friendship Park is all about. And, friendship puts a smile on people's face. And that was something that Javier told me personally. I love to play my music because my music puts a smile on people's face, and I like to make people happy.
That's great.
And that's the whole idea behind Friendship Park, to make people happy, to have people enjoy a beautiful park, enjoy their families, enjoy the friendship across the border that we have.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's very sad. The whole sort of canard is very sad, right? Like the idea that we have enough money to build a giant steel barrier, but not enough money to open this place up for, a few hours a week for people to see their families and enjoy themselves, enjoy that time together. It just seems almost like pointlessly cruel, I guess, which, I don't know, sometimes a lot of the immigration system seems pointlessly cruel to me.
Yes, absolutely. When you separate a mother from a child, that is cruel. When you won't allow a mother and a child to even be able to gather for a couple hours a week, separate from a barrier, that's very cruel. When you don't allow people of good nature, of goodwill, to visit, even though it is across a barrier, that is not good.
Yeah. And I think it's important that people across the country, obviously, it can be really difficult to care about everything, right? It's a pretty difficult time with Supreme Court decisions and seemingly sort of nonstop mass shootings. It's a difficult time for everyone, I think. But I think it's important that people realize that the border is where a lot of these policies get tried for the first time, right? These things which, if we look at the way that privacy of people living on the border has been eroded for a very long time, and that's happening to other people. It happened in 2020, right? It was a Border Patrol drone that was flying over Minneapolis during the protests. So if people want to push back and to show solidarity and support, how can they support the park, and how maybe can they support the people who are stuck in Tijuana and want to cross but aren't allowed to cross because of MPP or Title 42 or restrictive asylum sort of legislation?
Right. Well, what we're asking people to do, if you're in the Southern California area, rain or shine, we go ahead and continue having events at Friendship Park on the U.S. side, like our bike rides, our native flora workshops, our border church on Sundays at 1:30 in the afternoon. We invite people to come and join us. come and join us on a bike ride. Come and join us on Border Church, and show your support for the need to continue the work that had been done for so many years at Friendship Park in support of our binational families and our binational community. Also very important, contact your congressman, contact your senator. And if you're in California, of course, your California senators, assembly persons, we need to urge them to advocate for us before Homeland Security, before the Secretary of Homeland Security, so they may understand the importance of that Friendship Park offers, not only to the families but to our communities. You can secure a border a lot better through friendship than through border walls that at a given moment can be breached, as we have seen they have occurred. The strongest security that anybody can ever have is a good, strong relationship on both sides of the border.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. So if people want to come to Friendship Park, can you just explain how they would get to one of these events, like where they have to go?
Absolutely. What I would recommend is follow us on, we have a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram accounts, Friendship Park, and also our website, friendshippark.org, where we have information on all the different events on our Border Church. And this way you can join us on the U.S. side, or if you want to come to the Mexico side, is wide open. You can go directly right to the monument area, where you can enjoy this great, beautiful monument to commemorate the demarcation of the two countries. You can enjoy it either way, but we do like and we stress people to come out and join us on the U.S. side, so that we're not forgotten. So that this beautiful piece of land on Borderfield State Park, known as Friendship Park, is not forgotten. And not only that, enjoy the beauty of the park. We have a beautiful park there, Borderfield State Park, adjacent to Friendship Park. Something that very few people are being taken advantage of lately. We've had quite a few more visitors out there. Horseback riding, bicycling, a few families out taking a dip in the ocean. But this is a beautiful beach that we have there on the U.S. side, and welcome our community, our San Diego community, to come and enjoy it as well. And as you come and enjoy it, you support our efforts to demonstrate the need to keep our park open.
Yeah, I think that's a very it's not hard for people to help, and I hope they will. How long do we have, do you think? How long do we have before they break ground on this new wall?
Right. We're not sure how long we have. We were told that it was a matter of weeks. Does that mean 2 weeks, 3 weeks? It's hard to say, but we know that it could happen at any time. Lately, we've observed several crews out there doing surveys and such of the area. So we know that it's any moment they should be breaking ground. And we hope that before that ground breaks, that they will consider our request and call for public support, for public input as to what the park should look like. Give that consideration to if you're going to replace walls, to make sure that that gates are allotted so that these visits can continue. Because as we understand there's no provision at this point for any kind of gate for person access, for people access into the area. That, of course, tells you that there's no intention of continuing at one point to open the park for the visits. And of course, that's extremely concerning.
Yeah, especially for people separated by the border. Okay, so just to finish up, can you give us those social medias and web addresses again where people can find you and help?
Sure, absolutely. Our website is www.friendshippark.org. The Facebook, you can find us under Friendship Park. You can also find information under Border Church.
Great. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. I know it's a busy time for you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today.
Thank you.
Hey, we'll be back Monday with more episodes every week from now until the heat death of the universe.
It Could Happen Here is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more podcasts from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check us out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find sources for It Could Happen Here updated monthly at coolzonemedia.com/sources. Thanks for listening.
I'm Amanda Knox, and in the new podcast, Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby, we unpack the story of an unimaginable tragedy that gripped the UK in 2023. But what if we didn't get the whole story?
Evidence has been made to fit. The moment you look at the whole picture, the case collapses.
What if the truth was disguised by a story we chose to believe?
Oh my God, I think she might be innocent.
Listen to Doubt, the Case of Lucy Letby on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, it's Jill Winterstein, host of the Spirit Daughter podcast, where we talk about astrology, natal charts, and how to step into your most vibrant life. And today I'm talking with my dear friend, Krista Williams.
It can change you in the best way possible. Dance with the change, dance with the breakdowns.
The embodiment of Pisces intuition with Capricorn power moves.
So I'm like delusionally proud of my chart.
Listen to the Spirit Daughter podcast starting on February 24th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
This is Special Agent Regal, Special Agent Bradley Hall.
In 2018, the FBI took down a ring of spies working for China's Ministry of State Security, one of the most mysterious intelligence agencies in the world.
The Sixth Bureau podcast is a story of the inner workings of the MSS and how one man's ambition and mistakes opened its vault of secrets.
Listen to the Sixth Bureau on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Clayton Echard. In 2022, I was the lead of ABC's The Bachelor.
But here's the thing. Bachelor fans hated him.
If I could press a button and rewind it all, I would.
That's when his life took a disturbing turn. A one-night stand would end in a courtroom.
The media is here. This case has gone viral.
The dating contract.
Agree to date me, but I'm also suing you.
This is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I'm Stephanie Young. Listen to Love Trapped on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.